Sergei Popov, the battalion clerk, closed the folder with a methodical click. Personal files, draft 215. The neat inscription, written in his calligraphic hand, graced the cover. He blew an invisible speck of dust off it and placed the folder on the shelf, aligning it perfectly with the others. Order. In this chaos of clanking tracks, the smell of diesel fuel, and sweaty bodies, his small office in the headquarters was an island of civilization. Here, only paper, printer toner, and cheap instant coffee, which he brewed in a mug with the unit emblem, provided the aroma. "Hey, Comrade Private! Hey, Comrade Private!" A breathless face of some newbie from the 3rd Company appeared in the doorway. Face red, uniform baggy, eyes frightened. Textbook case. Sergei slowly turned his head, keeping his hand on a stack of freshly printed reports. He gave the soldier a look he'd practiced in front of the mirror, a mixture of weary superiority and slight disdain. "I'm listening," he said deliberately, slowly, and politely, the way he spoke to officers. But there was so much coldness in that politeness that the newbie shrank. "I need to get this leave request signed." The sergeant major signed it. The company commander too. They said to bring it to you at headquarters, to be typed up. The soldier held out a crumpled piece of paper. Sergei took it with 2 fingers, as if it were something contagious. He scanned the text. Crooked letters. Corrections. "Name?" Popov snapped. "Private Morozov, Viktor." Morozov. Sergei stretched the surname out, as if savoring the taste. "Are you aware that a request is written without corrections and on a standard A4 sheet, not on a scrap torn from a notebook? And that the address to the commanding officer is written in the upper right corner, not somewhere in the middle?" Morozov turned even redder. I didn't know, Comrade Private. I was given a sample." "You were given a bad sample, Morozov." "A very bad one." Sergei disdainfully tossed the paper onto the edge of the desk. "Rewrite it. Properly. Get a blank form from your sergeant major. When you write it so that the chief of staff's eyes don't bleed, then you can come back. Dismissed." Viktor Morozov mumbled something, snatched his wretched request, and bolted from the office. Sergei smirked. Infantry. Cannon fodder. All they know how to do is run and dig. Even drafting a simple document is an impossible task. He, Sergei Popov, was different. He was the brains. Back in training camp, he realized, in the modern army, it's not the strongest who survives, but the smartest. The one who knows how to read orders between the lines and knows who to approach. A couple of bottles of good cognac for the head of the personnel department, a demonstration of perfect handwriting and innate neatness. And here he was, in a warm office, far from morning runs and frozen training grounds. Combat veterans, decked out in fashionable gear and returning from Syria, looked at him as if he were nothing. Clerk, paper pusher, office rat. He heard these whispers behind his back. Let them. At least he sleeps in the warm, doesn't peel potatoes on kitchen duty, and has access to information. And information is power. He knew who was being sent on the next deployment, who was getting leave, and who the security officer had a grudge against. And that power warmed him far more than the dubious respect of the brothers who might not return from their next sortie tomorrow. His phone vibrated in his pocket. An old button-operated Nokia, permitted by regulations. A call from an unknown number. He frowned. Usually only his family called him. He went out into the corridor, which reeked of bleach and barracks food. "Hello? Seryoja? Seryojenka? It's Aunt Galia." The voice on the other end of the line trembled. Aunt Galia, his mother's sister. His heart plummeted into his stomach. "Hello, Aunt Gal. What's wrong? Is everything okay with Mom? Seryozha, just don't worry. Mom's worse. Really bad. The world narrowed down to the voice on the phone, the noise of the corridor, the day duty's footsteps, the hum of the lamps. Everything disappeared. What do you mean worse? He squeezed out, feeling his lips go numb. She was in remission. The doctors said everything was fine. Oncology. That word had been hanging over their family for 2 years now. But for the last year, everything had been stable. Mom had even gone back to work at her library, laughed on the phone, said her hair was almost grown back. That was a week ago, Seryozha. And yesterday, a sharp deterioration. Metastasis. The doctor was here today. He said it's a matter of days. Maybe a week, if we're lucky. She's been calling for you all the time. I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry. Aunt Galia cried, and Sergei stood, pressing the phone to his ear, staring at the peeling wall with the poster, "Vigilance is our weapon." The world, so understandable and orderly, shattered into pieces. Mom. Dying. A week. And he still had 4 months until his discharge. 4 months of eternity. "I'll come," he said mechanically, not even believing his own words. "Aunt Gal, I'll come. Do you hear me? I will be there." He hung up. His hands were shaking so badly that he almost dropped the phone. He went back into the office, sat down at the desk, and stared at the perfect stack of papers. All of it, the reports, the orders, the personal files, suddenly lost all meaning. What difference did it make if the folder was straight when his mother was dying 1,000 kilometers away? Panic gave way to cold fury. He was a clerk. He knew the system. He would get out of it. Leave of absence for family reasons. Article 51 of the Internal Service Regulations. Serious illness or death of a close relative. It was his right. Barely feeling the ground beneath his feet, he burst out of the office and raced down the corridor to the office of his immediate superior, the battalion chief of staff, Captain Orlov. He barged in without knocking, violating all written and unwritten rules. Captain Orlov, a tired-looking man of about 35 with graying temples, looked up at him from the map spread out on the table. "Popov, are you out of your mind?" "Comrade Captain, permission to speak," Sergei blurted out, gasping for breath. He snapped to attention, but his whole body was trembling. "Spit it out, since you've already barged in." Stumbling and mixing up his words, Sergei told him everything, about the phone call, about his mother, about the oncology, about the doctor's words. "I need a leave of absence, for family reasons. 10 days, not counting travel time. It's stipulated in the regulations." "I'll write a report, everything according to the rules." Captain Orlov listened in silence, his gaze shifting from surprise to sympathetic. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Popov. Damn. I'm sorry to hear that, truly. But what, Comrade Captain? It's the law, the regulations." "But not right now," the captain said quietly, but firmly. "Do you even realize what's happening in the unit? In 2 weeks, there's the final district inspection. Generals will be arriving. All passes and leaves have been canceled by order of the division commander, all of them. Plus, a consolidated detachment is being prepared to be sent to Syria. Your 3rd company is almost entirely flying out. The unit is on high alert. No leave request will go any further than my desk right now. The brigade commander won't even look at it. He'll just tear it up." Sergei stared at him, uncomprehending. "But it's my mother. She's dying." "I understand, Popov. I understand everything. I buried my own father like that 2 years ago," Orlov sighed. "They didn't let me go back then either. There were exercises. I understand everything, but an order is an order. I can't break it. No one can. The general's inspection is sacrosanct. If anyone leaves the unit now, heads will roll, and mine will be the first. You can write the report after the inspection. In 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The doctor said a week. Maybe. In 2 weeks it might be too late, Comrade Captain, Sergei whispered. There's nothing I can do, Private. Orlov snapped, and the steel returned to his voice. He was slipping back into the role of commanding officer. I sympathize, but that's the service. Go back to work. And don't barge in here like that again. Dismissed. Sergei left the office as if in a dream. His legs felt like jelly, his ears were ringing. The system he knew so well, the one he thought was his protection, had slammed a steel door in his face. The rules he had used to elevate himself above others now held him hostage. He staggered down the corridor, oblivious to his surroundings. Order, inspection, Syria. These words sounded like a death sentence. He returned to his empty office and collapsed into his chair. The order on his desk was irritating. The perfectly aligned stacks of papers seemed like a mockery. He swept them into a pile and threw them on the floor. The sheets scattered around the room like a flock of startled birds. He sat there for a long time, maybe an hour. The panic subsided, leaving behind a burnt-out emptiness and a cold, ringing resolve. If the system doesn't work, you have to bypass it. If the door is locked, you have to climb through the window. AWOL. The word surfaced in his mind, terrifying and alien. Unauthorized absence. The brig, prison, a ruined life. But on the other side of the scale was his mother's face, her smile, the fact that he might never see her again. Not say goodbye, not hold her hand. The choice was obvious, but he couldn't do it alone. Getting out of the unit, which was on high alert, was almost impossible. Patrols everywhere, posts. He needed money for the trip, civilian clothes. He needed help. The help of those he despised, those who lived not by the regulations, but by their own barracks laws. In the evening, after lights out, when the barracks plunged into semi-darkness and filled with the measured breathing and snoring of 150 men, Sergei quietly got out of his bunk near the entrance. He pulled on his boots and, trying not to make any noise, moved deeper into the compound, to the far corner where the grandfathers, the contract soldiers, lived. The air was different here, thicker. It smelled not only of foot wraps and sweat, but also of expensive perfume, tobacco, and something else elusive: power. Several men were sitting on a few bunks, huddled around the dim light of a smartphone. In the center, with one leg crossed over the other, sat Timur Karimov, a contract soldier who had been through the Second Chechen War and several tours in Syria. In the unit, he was called, behind his back, the Wolf. Lean, sinewy, with a sharp, blade-like gaze in his dark eyes. The Wolf wasn't the strongest physically. There was Pavel Smirnov in the company, nicknamed Jock, a mountain of muscle, but everyone feared and respected him. He had the final word in any argument. Next to him sat that very Jock and another contract soldier, Nikolai Solovey, a former signalman, nicknamed Wireman for his ability to get anything and negotiate with anyone. They were talking quietly, but as Sergei approached, he caught fragments of phrases. "Snitched to the spook again, rat!" Jock hissed through his teeth. Romka Sidorov got 10 days in the brig for having a burner phone. "It's not about the phone," Volk replied calmly, not taking his eyes off the screen. "It's about the fact that he has one. There's a snitch in the unit, and that's really bad before deployment, really bad. The security officer will be jumping on every little thing now." Sergei froze. He knew about the snitch. The whole battalion was buzzing about it. Someone was regularly reporting everything that happened in the barracks to the captain from the special department, who was drinking, who had smuggled in an unauthorized phone, who was selling diesel to the drivers. It created a nervous, poisonous atmosphere. Everyone was eyeing everyone else suspiciously, but he didn't have time for that now. He approached them closely. The conversation died down. 3 pairs of eyes stared at him. In Volk's gaze, there was no surprise, no hostility. Just the cold curiosity of a predator noticing a strange movement in its territory. "What do you want, scribe?" Timur's voice was quiet, almost devoid of inflection. "Lose something? Or did you come to listen to what the grown-ups are talking about?" The muscle-head smirked. The signalman silently scrutinized Sergei. Sergei swallowed. All his staff arrogance, all his affected importance, fell away like husks. In front of them, he was nobody, just a frightened conscript coming to beg a favor. "I need help," he said so quietly that he could barely hear himself. "Help?" Volk slowly raised his eyes to him. In the dim light, they seemed completely black. "You, scribe. You're usually self-sufficient. You're on friendly terms with the officers, sitting pretty in the warm. What could have happened in your paper paradise?" Sergei took a deep breath, steeling himself. He looked directly into Volk's eyes. "I need to go AWOL. Tonight. My mother is dying." Pavel Smirnov, the headquarters clerk, was retyping the report on yesterday's ammunition expenditure for the 10th time. The letters swam before his eyes, merging into gray, meaningless lines. Fingers, used to flying across the keyboard, tapped slowly, uncertainly, as if they didn't belong to him. He could still hear the crackling in the telephone receiver and his sister's breaking voice. "Pasha, Mom is really bad. The doctors say, Pash, please come. She's waiting for you." He mechanically pressed save, then print. The printer in the corner of the office whirred unhappily, spitting out a perfectly smooth sheet. Perfect. Like everything that clerk Smirnov did, he was the best in the unit at that. His calligraphic handwriting decorated the notice boards. His reports didn't raise questions even from the most meticulous inspectors from the district. He was a cog in the staff machine, but an important cog, well-oiled and indispensable, and he used to be proud of it. Before. The office door creaked. Captain Orlov, his immediate superior, entered. A walking regulation, a living instruction manual. "Smirnov, is it ready? The major needs it for signing in 5 minutes." "Yes, sir, Captain. Already printed it." Pavel stood up, snapping to attention, and handed him the paper. His face expressed nothing but the statutory obedience. The mask he had been wearing for almost a year had become permanently attached. The captain scanned the lines. "Good. Take it to the major, and come see me afterwards. I have something to discuss." Pavel's heart skipped a beat. A discussion? Maybe about the leave request? He had submitted it yesterday morning, immediately after his sister's call. "Due to family circumstances in connection with a sudden deterioration in my mother's health." He had written everything according to the rules, attached a scan of the telegram his sister had sent to the unit's address. He was hoping. He, who knew all the ins and outs, all the bureaucratic loopholes, believed that the system he had served so faithfully would work for him too. The major's office smelled of expensive cologne and coffee. Major Savchenko, the deputy battalion commander, a man of the new generation, with a laptop on his desk and a permanent Bluetooth headset in his ear, took the report without looking. "What do you have there, Smirnov?" "Permission to speak, Comrade Major." Pavel's voice was even, but inside everything was twisted into an icy knot. "Go ahead. I submitted a request yesterday for short-term leave due to family circumstances." The major raised a heavy gaze to him. "Ah, that's you. Smirnov." He put the paper down and leaned back in his chair. "Listen here, soldier. I understand you have problems there. Your mother is sick. I sympathize. Really. But have you seen what time it is? What time is it now?" Pavel remained silent, clutching the seam of his trousers. We have a planned rotation in 2 weeks, preparing a group for Syria. The unit is on high alert. The security officer from the district has been sniffing around for 2 weeks now, looking for something to latch on to. What the hell leave are you talking about? The brigade commander will tear my head off if I start letting people go now. We need every person, even a clerk. Comrade Major, but I have a critical situation. Everyone has a critical situation, Smirnov. The major slammed his hand on the desk. Popov's father had a stroke, can barely walk. Karimov's son was born. He's only seen him in photos. Duty is duty. Your mother is in the hospital, under the care of doctors, and the motherland, Smirnov, cannot be left unattended. Understood? Yes, sir. That's all. Go to work. I won't sign your request. The matter is closed. Pavel spun on his heels. About face. Forward march. The commands echoed in his head as he walked along the echoing corridor of headquarters. Motherland. Service. Duty. Beautiful words that he himself had written hundreds of times in reports and battle bulletins. Now they seemed empty and false. His mother was dying, and he had to sit here and retype reports on ammunition expenditure. In the evening, the barracks were stuffy and tense. The duty officer was scrubbing the floors with a ferocity that Pavel hadn't seen in a long time. The entire company had been killing the premises for the second hour, after the deputy commander for political affairs found a hidden smartphone in someone's bedside table during evening roll call. Everyone was punished. Collective responsibility. Pavel, exempt from the general fuss as a staff worker, sat on his bunk in the corner and tried to neaten the lining on his fresh collar. His hands were trembling. He felt eyes on him, heavy, angry ones. "Jeweler, goddammit!" A low voice boomed nearby. Pavel looked up. Looming over him was Sergei Popov, also known as the Muscle. A mountain of muscle built in the unit's gym, and intelligence just enough to tell a rifle from a shovel. He was respected for his strength and feared for his tough temper. "Hiding out in headquarters again, rat," Sergei hissed. "We're polishing the floors here because of some jerk, and you're all clean." "I was carrying out the captain's order," Pavel replied calmly, looking at his hands. Arguing with the Muscle was pointless. "Orders?" Sergei smirked. "And you don't know whose phone it was, eh, scribe? You're the one who knows everything. Who ratted to the deputy commander for political affairs?" Viktor Morozov, the Muscle's shadow and eternal sidekick, appeared next to him. "I bet he's the one who ratted, sitting there, warm and cozy, shuffling papers, listening to what the officers are saying, whispering in the special officer's ear, and then we suffer." Pavel felt nausea rising in his throat. This was the main conflict of his service. He was staff, untouchable. They were infantry, cannon fodder. To them, he was an outsider, a traitor by definition. And now, when a rat had clearly taken root in the company, giving everyone away to the special officer, suspicion fell on him first, the most informed, the most distant from their barrack-room brotherhood. "I don't know anything," Pavel said firmly, looking up. "And I'm not ratting on anyone." "Oh, really?" Sergei Popov leaned closer, his face a couple of centimeters from Pavel's. He smelled of sweat and anger. "Well, we think otherwise. And you know what they do with rats in the barracks, Smirnov? They crush them. Slowly." He straightened up and walked away, tossing over his shoulder. "Watch your step, scribe. You might stumble in the dark." Pavel remained sitting, feeling cold sweat trickling down his spine. The threat was more than real. The Dark One. A classic of army justice. A blanket over the head and a few precise blows to the kidneys. No bruises, but very painful, and no one saw anything. He understood that he was in a bind, On one side, the indifferent army machine, which didn't give a damn about his dying mother. On the other, the embittered barracks, ready to tear him apart on suspicion of snitching. He was alone, absolutely alone. And at that moment, the decision that had been brewing somewhere in the back of his mind took shape into a clear, distinct plan. AWOL. But how? Without money, without civilian clothes, with the prospect of being caught by the first patrol outside the unit's gates. It was suicide. He needed help. His gaze swept across the barracks and stopped at the bunk by the window. Timur Karamov sat there, a contract soldier, not from their draft, several years older. Dagestani, quiet, kept to himself, didn't really make friends with anyone, but didn't conflict either. The muscle and his company avoided him. There was a certain inner strength in Timur, not ostentatious like Sergei Popov's, but real, deep. He had been through Chechnya, then signed a contract. They said he had connections everywhere, and outside the unit too. Pavel took a deep breath. It was his only chance. He had to take a risk. He had to step over his pride, over his headquarters' arrogance, and ask for help from someone who, like everyone else, he secretly considered inferior to himself. He waited until the lights were turned off in the barracks, and the command, "Lights out," was given. He waited another half-hour, listening as the room filled with sleepy breathing and snoring. Then he quietly slid off the bunk. Barefoot, on tiptoe, he moved toward Timur's bunk. Every creak of the springs under someone else's sleeping body echoed like thunder in his ears. There he was, the muscle, sleeping, his huge arms spread wide. Pavel slipped past, holding his breath. Timur wasn't sleeping. He was lying with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling, and when Pavel approached, he didn't even stir. "What do you want, scribe?" His voice was quiet, but distinct. Pavel squatted down by his bed.
"I need help," he whispered. "Help costs money, or a favor in return. What do you have?" Pavel was momentarily at a loss. He was used to his position in headquarters being currency in itself, but Timur was different. "I need to leave. For a few days," Pavel blurted out. "Home. My mother, she's dying." Timur was silent. In the dim light from the window, Pavel could see his inscrutable face. "AWOL?" he finally said. "Are you out of your mind, Smirnov? Now? When the special officers are all over the place? They'll pick you up in 3 hours on the way out of the city, and it won't be just the guardhouse anymore. It'll be a charge, desertion, 3 years in a penal colony. Want that?" "I can't stay here." Despair broke through Pavel's whisper. "You don't understand." "You're the one who doesn't understand," Timur replied, just as quietly but firmly. "You think you're the only one? Every other person here has someone who's sick, dying, or being born. This is the army, kid. It breaks you. And if you don't bend, it'll devour you." Pavel lowered his head. He was prepared for a refusal, but he had to try. "I know who's snitching," he suddenly said, surprised by his own boldness. It was his only trump card, a dangerous one, but possibly effective. Timur slowly turned his head and looked at him point blank. Interest flickered in his eyes. "Go on." "It wasn't me," Pavel quickly whispered. "I saw papers at headquarters. The counterintelligence officer is developing a case. He's interested in those who are bringing drugs in from civilian life. He planted his guy back in training camp, Private Sidorov from the 3rd Platoon, a quiet, unassuming type. I saw a copy of his report to the major. He turned in that guy with the smartphone. And he's preparing a list of the others." Pavel fell silent, catching his breath. He had revealed information that could cost him dearly if it fell into the wrong hands.
but he looked into Timur's eyes and, for some reason, believed that these were the right ears. Timur was silent for a long time, considering what he had heard. Sidorov. That's right. Quiet. A gray mouse. No one would have suspected him. All right, he finally said. The information is valuable. Sergei and the guys will be grateful to you. Maybe they'll even stop looking at you sideways. I don't need their gratitude, Pavel said bitterly. I need to get to my mother. Timur looked at him again. His gaze no longer held its former coldness. There was something else there. Understanding. Maybe even respect. He saw before him not just a stuck-up clerk, but a desperate son. Getting out of the unit is only half the battle, he said just as quietly. Coming back is harder. If you just disappear, you'll be put on the wanted list. When you return, you'll face a court-martial. There's only one way. What? Pavel grasped at his words with hope. You need to not be listed as AWOL. You need to officially be here. For example, in the infirmary, with a high fever, for a few days. Pavel didn't understand. But how? People will see me. No one will see you. Timur smirked. The doc, our medic, owes me. Big time. He'll put you in isolation for 3 days. Make a note in the log. Temperature of 39.5, suspected pneumonia. No one will look for you, and at night, I'll get you out. A car will be waiting outside the fence. I'll find clothes and money. You'll have exactly 3 days. In 3 days at night, you need to be at the same place. I'll meet you and just as quietly get you back into isolation. And in the morning, the doc will cure you and discharge you. Got the plan? Pavel stared at him, stunned. The plan was audacious, risky, but ingenious. It was a chance, the only one. But why are you helping me? He couldn't help asking. Timur turned to the window. I had a mother too, scribe, he said hoarsely. And I served too. When she was dying, they wouldn't let me go. Said the situation was complicated. I never got to say goodbye. He paused. No one should go through that. No one. He looked at Pavel again. Tomorrow after breakfast, you go to the infirmary. Complain about chills, headache, weakness. Act convincingly. The doc will be expecting you. And then, do what I say. And remember, Smirnov, if you don't come back in 3 days, you'll be screwing not only yourself, you'll be screwing me and the doc, and we don't like that very much. Very much. Pavel nodded, unable to utter a word. Go to sleep, Timur tossed out, and not a word to anyone, not even in your sleep, especially not to Sergei. I'll get the information about Sidorov to him myself, at the right moment. And you're now a sick man, a very sick soldier. Pavel just as quietly returned to his bunk. He lay down and stared at the dark ceiling. His heart was pounding like crazy. The fear hadn't gone anywhere. But now another feeling was mixed in, one he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, fragile, dangerous, but so desired. He would leave. He would see his mother. He had to make it. So, it's you, huh? Sergei Popov's, nicknamed Kachok, musclehead. Voice wasn't loud, but in the cramped smoking room, smelling of damp tarpaulin and cheap tobacco, it sounded like a hammer blow on an anvil. Viktor Morozov flinched as if he had actually been hit. He stood with his back pressed against the peeling, painted a toxic green wall, and looked at the 3 men who were cutting off his escape route, cornered. In the center was Popov, as massive as a wardrobe. On the left, leaning against the windowsill and calmly looking away, was the unhurried and reasonable Timur Karimov. On the right, more out of curiosity than hostility, was another soldier from their platoon, fidgeting. Pavel Smirnov, the clerk, stood slightly to the side, near the entrance, formally not participating, but blocking the last path of retreat. He felt sick, not from fear, but from disgust at the whole scene. While they were playing at barracks justice here, somewhere thousands of kilometers away, his mother was dying. The thought was a red-hot nail hammered into his brain. It overshadowed everything. Morozov's strained face, Kachok's heavy breathing, and even the usual fear of the headquarters staff. Yesterday's phone call from his sister echoed in his ears, a relentless drone. "Pasha, the doctors say it's bad, very bad. She's calling for you, constantly." "I don't understand what you're talking about," Morozov stammered, trying to feign confusion. His eyes darted from Popov's face to Karimov's, seeking support, but finding only cold detachment. "You understand perfectly well, you rat," Sergei Popov hissed, taking a step forward. He wasn't nicknamed the Muscle for nothing. Even in the loose-fitting fatigues, his muscles bulged, giving the impression of a coiled spring. "Orlov got 10 days in the brig, for a phone, which he only managed to get out once a week to talk to his wife. And you know what's interesting? Only 4 people knew about that phone. Me, Karimov, you, and Orlov himself." Pavel Smirnov grimaced inwardly. He knew too. Orlov, a trusting guy from the sticks, had once boasted to him, the clerk, that he'd managed to sneak a cell phone past all the shakedowns. Pavel had just snorted condescendingly back then. He, a staffer, was almost officially authorized a phone, for official necessity. He used it openly, provoking envy and muted irritation in the others. Now, that privilege seemed like a mockery. He could call home whenever he wanted, but what good was it if he couldn't be there? "So maybe it was Karimov, or you yourself?" Morozov's voice cracked, rising to a squeal. "Why immediately me?" Timur Karimov pushed himself off the windowsill. He was the complete opposite of Popov, wiry, dark-haired, with intelligent, calm eyes. He was respected not for strength, but for fairness, and a rare, for the barracks, ability to think 2 steps ahead. "Because, Vitya, yesterday the security officer summoned only one person from our company. You. Smirnov can confirm it. He was just in the HQ, filing papers." All eyes turned to Pavel. This was it. The moment he'd been trying to avoid. His cozy world above the fray, his status as an untouchable HQ intellectual, was now falling apart at the seams. He had to make a choice. Remain silent, maintaining his neutrality and contempt for these proletarians in jackboots, or confirm their suspicions and become a full participant in this dirty business. In his head, his sister's voice echoed again. "Pasha, she won't wait." "Yes," he said dryly, clearly, with that same staff intonation he used to report to the major. "Captain Zubov from the Special Department summoned Private Morozov yesterday at 17:40. I personally saw him go into the office. He came out 20 minutes later. An hour later, the order came down regarding the arrest of Private Orlov." He uttered it like a report, without emotion. But inside, everything tightened. He'd betrayed his main principle. Don't get involved. He'd chosen a side. The side of these guys he'd been despising just that morning for their simplicity and straightforwardness. Morozov's face contorted. The last thread of hope had snapped. He slid down the wall, squatting on his heels. "Guys, you don't understand. He threatened me. Said if I didn't report, he'd find something to lock me up for. I have a mother at home. She's sick." At the word mother, Pavel felt as if he'd been jolted by electricity. He clenched his teeth so hard his jaw muscles ached. He has a sick mother, the bastard. He's selling out his own to curry favor, hiding behind a sick mother, while his, Pavel's, real mother is fading away, and he's sitting here, thousands of kilometers away, listening to this pathetic bleating. Rage, cold and sharp, pierced him. "Shut up!" he spat out, surprised by his own tone. The voice was alien, harsh. "Just shut up!" Sergei Popov looked at the clerk in surprise. He hadn't expected such a reaction from the perpetually polite and aloof Smirnov. The muscle turned his gaze back to Morozov, and in his eyes there was neither rage nor anger, only heavy, icy contempt. "Get up," he ordered. "No one's going to beat you. We're not animals, and neither are you. From this day forward, Morozov, as far as this company is concerned, you don't exist. Understand? You're an empty space. No one will shake your hand. No one will sit at the same table with you in the mess hall. If you drop something, no one will pick it up. If some newbie from another draft tries to mess with you, no one will stand up for you. You'll live in this barracks alone, until demobilization. Now get out of here." Viktor Morozov, staggering, got to his feet. His face was as white as a sheet. He scanned everyone with empty eyes and, hunching over, shuffled towards the exit. Pavel Smirnov silently stepped aside, letting him pass. When Morozov walked by, he didn't look at him. The dreaded barracks word hung in the air. Untouchable. Outcast. Living dead man. When Morozov's footsteps faded in the corridor, Popov turned to Pavel. "Thanks, Smirnov. Didn't expect that." Pavel just shrugged. He had no time for thanks. The tension had eased, and reality was once again weighing down on him with its full force. The image of his mother, her emaciated face that he'd seen on Skype a week ago, stood before his eyes. He felt as if he were being slowly drowned in ice-cold water. "It's nothing," he said dully. "What's going to happen to him now?" "He'll survive." Timur Karamov shrugged. "The security officer will cover for him, since he's got him on a hook. He'll keep snitching, but now everyone knows who he is. That's worse than any brig." They left the smoking room and walked silently down the echoing barrack corridor. The smell of bleach, sweat, and gun oil, the eternal aroma of his service. The aroma of his prison. The company's quarters were noisy. Someone was polishing boots. Someone was sewing on a fresh collar, preparing for the evening formation. Pavel reached his bunk, the one farthest by the window, a privilege he'd traded for with the sergeant major for help with reports. He sat down, staring blankly at a single point. The report. He had already written 3 reports, addressed to the platoon commander, the company commander, the battalion commander. Request a short-term leave of absence for family reasons due to the sudden deterioration of my mother's health, Anna Viktorovna Smirnova. He attached a scan of a medical certificate his sister had sent to each report. The answer was the same, verbal, through the company commander. "Smirnov, I understand everything, but we're being transferred to Syria in 2 weeks. We have exercises, unit cohesion. The battalion commander won't let anyone go, absolutely no one. Just endure it, soldier. Come back a hero, you can go then. Endure it." That word pounded in his temples. Endure it. He pulled his phone from under the mattress. His fingers automatically dialed his sister's number, ringing. Long, agonizing rings. "Pasha?" Lena's voice was tired, tearful. "How is she?" he asked, and his own voice sounded alien to him. "Bad, Pash. The doctor said maybe a few days, maybe a week. She's barely conscious, but when she is, she calls for you, all the time. Where's Pashenka?" "Is he coming?" I don't know what to tell her." Pavel closed his eyes. The floor swayed beneath him. The barrack noise, voices, laughter, all receded into the background, drowned in a viscous silence. He could only see the hospital ward, the IV drip, the white sheets, and his mother.
I'm coming, he said firmly, not understanding where that confidence came from. You hear me, Lena? Tell her I'm coming. I'll be there soon. How? They won't let you go? I'm coming, he repeated and hung up. He sat there, clutching the useless piece of plastic in his hand. That was it. The end. The end of his proper service, his desk job career, his hopes for a peaceful discharge. He would go AWOL. There was no other way. He didn't give a damn about the exercises, about Syria, about a court-martial. If he didn't see his mother now, he would never forgive himself. But how? The unit was on lockdown. Perimeter, patrols, checkpoint. He, the clerk, knew neither loopholes nor the schedule for changing the guard. He was a master of paperwork, not escapes. He was doomed. Smirnov, why are you so pale? Sergei Popov sat down on the bunk next to him. He looked at Pavel without the usual mockery, with a new, serious expression. The story with Morozov had changed something in their relationship. Is the brass getting on your case again? Pavel slowly raised his eyes to him. The clerk's gaze was such that the jock involuntarily recoiled. There was neither fear nor servility in it, only black, bottomless despair. My mother is dying, Popov, he said quietly, almost in a whisper. The jock froze. All his feigned bravado, all his muscle mass suddenly seemed insignificant. He saw before him not a little clerk, not a desk rat, but a simple guy crushed by grief. Did you write a report? He asked just as quietly. I did. The battalion commander won't sign it. Exercises, Syria, you know. I know. Popov nodded. He was silent, looking at his huge hands resting on his knees. Bastards. They sat in silence for a few minutes. The noise in the barracks continued, but a kind of vacuum had formed around them. I need to go home, Pavel said, staring at the wall. At any cost. AWOL? Popov said the word as if tasting it. They'll catch you. Court-martial, Smirnov. Disciplinary battalion at best, especially before deployment. They'll consider it desertion. I don't care. Sergei Popov looked at him for a long time. He saw not a whim, not cowardice. He saw desperation, and he knew an unwritten army law that was higher than any regulation. A mother is sacred. Okay, he finally said, and his voice was firm and confident again. So, here's what. You won't go alone. You know too much on paper, and too little in reality. He got up and called Timur Karimov, who was nearby spreading out his discharge album on a stool. Timur, come here. We have a situation. Karimov approached, and the three of them formed a tight circle by Pavel's bunk. Smirnov's mother is dying, Popov said, briefly explaining the situation. The command is refusing. He wants to go AWOL. AWOL. Unauthorized absence from the unit. The word sounded like a sentence. Timur looked at Pavel, then at Popov. His face was serious. The risk is huge. There's heightened security now. Patrols every 2 hours around the entire perimeter, plus tripwires on the paths. I know, Popov nodded. But if a man is desperate, then we need to help. We're not rats, like some people. He looked meaningfully towards Morozov's bunk, where he sat, huddled up, and pretended to read the regulations. What's the plan? Timur asked, already accepting the rules of the game. The plan is simple and stupid, Popov said. Tomorrow night, our draft goes on guard duty at the Far Fuel and Lubricants Depot. Post number 7, the most remote. Savchenko will be standing watch. He's a good guy, one of us. We can talk to him. The section of the fence behind the cisterns is poorly screwed on. You can bend it back. The main thing is to get there unnoticed.
What about morning roll call? They'll notice he's missing in 3 hours.
Karimov objected. Well, that's where. Popov clapped Pavel on the shoulder, making him jump. We'll need our scribe, or rather his talent. You, Smirnov, are on duty at headquarters tonight, right? Pavel nodded. It was his turn, his privileged duty. Not peeling potatoes, not scrubbing floors, but sitting in the warm, answering phones, and making sure the duty officer didn't fall asleep. Excellent, Kachok continued, a spark of excitement lighting up his eyes. The duty officer has a roster and leave slips. Your task is to create a fake leave for yourself, for a day, supposedly into town to get some bullshit for headquarters. Forge the battalion commander's signature. You're a calligraphy master after all. And you'll enter a note in the roster that Private Smirnov departed on leave with the permission of the unit commander. If they come looking for you in the morning, the sergeant major will first look at the roster. He'll see the entry and calm down. That will give you a head start. A day, maybe even more. Pavel listened, his breath catching in his throat. The plan was audacious, insane, and feasible. Forge the battalion commander's signature? He'd done it dozens of times when he needed to whip up some diploma or letter of appreciation. Enter a note in the roster? Easy peasy. While the duty officer dozes in his cubicle, that was his territory, his element. Paperwork. What about money? For the road? Timur asked. Pavel was silent. Almost all of his small salary went to his mother. He probably had a couple of 1,000 rubles on him, tops. Popov and Karimov exchanged glances. Without a word, Sergei reached into his inner jacket pocket and took out several folded 5,000-ruble notes. I don't have much on me. 10,000. Here. Timur pulled out his wallet. I have 5, and we'll chip in with the guys. It will be enough for a round-trip ticket home. Pavel looked at the money, at the hands outstretched to him. The hands of Kachok, whom he considered a dumb musclehead. The hands of Karimov, whom he respected but kept at a distance. These people, whom he considered beneath him, were now unhesitatingly risking everything for him. Their freedom, their future, and sharing their last. I can't, he whispered. You can, Popov said firmly. And you'll pay it back when you can. But for now, listen up. At 02 Hunquak, when the patrols change, you leave headquarters. Don't go to the barracks, but towards the motor pool. It's dark there, no cameras. Timur and I will be waiting for you around the corner of bay number 3. We'll lead you to post number 7. Then you're on your own. Run, don't look back. He looked at them, and for the first time in many months of service, he felt something akin to brotherhood, that word he used to laugh at. It turned out not to be empty words. It was in the money being offered, in the risky plan, in the serious faces of the 2 guys who were ready to commit a crime for his dying mother. His mask of a headquarters snob, an arrogant scribe, finally crumbled to dust. All that remained was him, Pavel Smirnov, his mother's son. And he would do anything to see her. Okay, he nodded, his voice steady. I'll do it. Well, if it isn't him, our headquarters scribe, the paper soldier. Sergei Popov's, Kachok's, voice hit Viktor Morozov in the back as soon as he stepped into the drying room. The door slammed shut behind him with a dull thud, cutting off the noise of the corridor. Inside, among the rows of damp uniforms, smelling of sweat and cheap powder, they were waiting for him. Kachok, as massive as a wardrobe, blocked the exit. Nearby, leaning against the wall, stood Timur Karimov, his narrow eyes studying Viktor intently. A little further away, by the window, loomed the shadow of Pavel Smirnov, silent but no less menacing for it. The air was heavy, stifling, saturated with unspoken rage. It was a trap. Viktor Morozov inwardly turned to ice, but he kept his face composed.
Years of service at headquarters had taught him one important thing: never show fear to those you consider beneath you. He was used to these muscleheads and grunts looking at him with hidden envy as he, clean, in an ironed uniform, walked past them, smeared with mud from the training ground, into the warm company office. He was different. He was the brains, and they were the brawn. "Is something wrong, Private Popov?" Victor said this with that hint of polite condescension that he had perfected over months. He took a step to the side, intending to pass by, but Kachok didn't budge. "Something is wrong, Private Morozov," Sergei Popov mimicked him, savoring the rank. "We have a rat in our company. You know, the headquarters kind. Loves paperwork, loves listening to other people's conversations, and most of all, he loves telling them to Major Orlov from the special department. Haven't seen one like that?" Victor felt a drop of sweat trickle down his temple. He knew, of course he knew. Major Orlov, the special investigator, was his unofficial patron. A couple of reports about who in the company was drinking, who was going to sell diesel fuel from the Ural, who was bragging about a shady phone with internet access. And in return, Victor was provided with a warm spot. No kitchen duty, no guard duty in the cold, no forced marches. Only neatly stacked papers, the smell of fresh toner from the printer, and respectful nods from the duty officers. He considered it a fair exchange. Survival. "I don't know what you're talking about," Victor ground out, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "If you have any official complaints, put them in a report. I'll help you write it, if your grammar's shaky." It was a mistake. The last phrase slipped out on its own, fueled by a habit of belittling. Kachok's face turned crimson. "Grammar Nazi, you motherfucker," he hissed, taking a step forward. Timur Karimov peeled himself off the wall, moving closer. "You thought we wouldn't find out? Thought you could hide behind the political officer's skirt forever? Because of your little note, Paska Smirnov almost got sent to the stockade for a phone call. He was talking to his mother. You get that, you piece of shit? She had an operation." Pavel Smirnov, standing by the window, flinched and glared at Victor. There was no rage in his gaze like Kachok's, but something worse, a cold, clinging contempt. The same kind Victor saw in the eyes of the combat troops when he passed them. Only now it was focused solely on him. "This is the army, not a finishing school." Victor took a step back, his back pressed against the hot radiator pipes. "There are regulations, and there are consequences for violating them. I'm just doing my duty." "Duty?" Timur Karimov laughed. His laughter was dry, like the crack of a breaking branch. "Your duty, scribe, is to keep your ass warm while others freeze theirs on the training ground. You're not a soldier, you're a servant, and today the servant will pay." Kachok slowly, deliberately rolled up his sleeves. His biceps seemed to have a life of their own, rippling under his skin. Victor realized words were useless. He was about to get beaten. Not badly, not hospital level. That would have consequences for everyone. He was going to be taught a lesson, humiliatingly, dirtily, so he would remember his place. He closed his eyes, waiting for the first blow. "Private Morozov, report to the duty officer of the company on the double." The orderly's shout from the hallway cut through the tense silence like a scalpel. Kachok froze, his arm raised. All three of them looked at the door. Victor exhaled, feeling his legs weaken. Saved, temporarily. "You got lucky, snitch," Sergei Popov growled, lowering his arm. "But this is just the beginning. We'll talk. In the barracks. At night. When your major is asleep." Victor, without answering, edged past him and slipped out of the drawing room. His heart was pounding in his throat. He walked down the long, dimly lit corridor, feeling 3 pairs of hateful eyes on his back. He had escaped. but the cage had slammed shut. Now the entire company was his enemy. The duty officer, a young lieutenant, held out the receiver of an old military phone that stood on a nightstand. "For you, from civilian life. But quick, this isn't a telephone exchange." Victor took the cold, heavy receiver. Usually they called him on his cell phone, which he hid in the storeroom. A call to the unit's switchboard meant something urgent. "Hello," he said, trying to control the tremor in his voice. "Vitya? Vitenka, it's me." The voice of his older sister, Olga, on the other end of the line was muffled, full of tears. "Vitya." Something inside him broke. He knew that tone. "What's wrong with Mom?" he asked in a whisper, turning away from the lieutenant. "She's very bad. Suddenly, last night, the doctors..." His sister was choking with sobs. "They said, Vitya, they said it's a matter of days, maybe weeks. She's calling for you. She keeps asking where Vitya is." The world narrowed to a small black circle of the telephone receiver. The noise of the barracks, the smell of chlorine, the lieutenant's face. Everything disappeared. All that remained was the stifled weeping of his sister and 4 terrible words. A matter of days. Mom. His mom, who wrote him long, funny letters, sent parcels with candies that he disdainfully gave away to others, and always ended the phone call with the phrase, "Take care of yourself, son." "I'll come," he said mechanically, not believing his own words. "How will you come? They won't let you go." "I will come." He cut off and hung up the phone. The lieutenant looked at his face, white as a sheet. "Problems, Morozov?" "No, comrade lieutenant. Everything's fine." A lie. Nothing was fine. Everything had collapsed. He returned to the company's location as if in a dream. The soldiers, cleaning their weapons after shooting practice, parted before him as if before a leper. No one looked him in the eye, but he felt their gazes. Contempt, hatred, gloating. Kachok, Timur, Pavel. They were sitting in the corner, and their quiet conversation stopped as soon as he entered. Victor went to his place, sat down on his perfectly made bed. There was an absolute vacuum in his head. Mom is dying. He has to be there. But how? First things first, the system. He believed in the system. He was a part of it. A report, due to family circumstances. A close relative's terminal illness. That was a guaranteed reason for a short leave. He, the clerk, knew this better than anyone. He tore a sheet from his notebook. His calligraphic handwriting, a source of pride and envy, formed even lines. To the commander of military unit, from Private Morozov Victor. Report. I request your consideration for a short-term leave, due to the serious illness of my mother. He'd attached the telegram he'd asked his sister to send. All by the book. Everything correct. Not a fly could find fault. With the ready report, he went to the company commander, Captain Solovyov. He was sitting in his office, checking some ledgers. Permission to enter, comrade captain? Come in, Morozov. What is it? Victor placed the report in front of him. The captain scanned it, his face remaining unchanged. He set the paper aside. I see. The telegram will be here? Yes, comrade captain. My sister will send it today. Good. Captain Solovyov rubbed his tired eyes. Leave it. I'll consider it. Victor felt a pang of hope. Consider it. Was something, at least. Comrade Captain, it's very urgent. The doctors say, I said I'll consider it, Morozov. The captain's voice hardened. He looked at Victor with a heavy gaze. And now, leave. And here's what I'll tell you. As a clerk and an informed individual, you have, to put it mildly, An unhealthy atmosphere in your company right now. And you, I hear, are at the very center of it. I don't have time for leaves right now. I need order in the unit. Do you understand me?" Victor understood. He understood everything. Unhealthy atmosphere was a euphemism. The company commander had already been informed, by Kachok and others, or, more likely, the sergeants. The company commander didn't need a barracks revolt because of some clerk snitch.
And the easiest way to quell the conflict was to show the company that justice had prevailed, that the snitch wouldn't get any special treatment, that he was now just like everyone else, even worse. His report was already lying on the edge of the table, doomed to the trash can. The system he had trusted so much had just spat him out. The special department officer, Orlov, wouldn't stick his neck out for such a minor thing, risking his relationship with the unit commander. For him, Victor was spent material. The company commander wouldn't let him go, to maintain calm in the company, and the company was waiting for night. He left the office stunned. He walked through the entire barracks, not seeing faces, and stopped at a window at the far end of the corridor. Outside the window was the unit's territory, the parade ground, the obstacle course, the snow-covered roofs of the garages, and further on, a fence with barbed wire, the border of two worlds.
There, beyond the fence, trains were heading west, towards his home, towards where his mother lay in a hospital bed calling for him. He was trapped. Officially, there was no way out. He was despised by the soldiers. He was written off by the officers. He was alone, an outsider to everyone. And in this absolute ringing void of despair, in his brain, accustomed to calculations, schemes, and clauses of regulations, a new, wild, forbidden word was born. It was as barbed as the wire on the fence and smelled of risk, a court-martial, and disgrace. But at the same time, it smelled of hope. AWOL. He looked at his hands. His fingers, accustomed to a pen and keyboard, were trembling slightly. He, a staff rat, a paper soldier, had never thought of such a thing. It was for the desperate, for the reckless, for those who had nothing to lose, and he now had nothing to lose. He returned to his bunk. In the nightstand, under a stack of clean laundry, lay a hidden civilian sweater and jeans. At the bottom, in a bag, was some money, saved from his salary. He looked at his watch. 6 hours until lights out. 7 until night, when Kachok would come. 8.5 until the train that left at 2:25 from the freight station 3 kilometers from the unit. For the first time in his entire service, Victor Morozov began to draw up a plan that had nothing to do with staff papers. It was a report written in blood and despair. And it wouldn't be the commander who signed it, but his own destiny. He looked up. Across from him, Timur Karimov was sitting and silently watching him. There was no longer a direct threat in his gaze. There was something else, complex, almost sympathy, or just the curiosity of a predator watching a wounded animal. "What, clerk, didn't they let you go?" Timur asked quietly, so that only Victor could hear. Victor nodded silently. Timur grunted, shook his head, and turned away. But before that, Victor managed to notice how his gaze slid to the window, behind which the night was beginning, and then to Victor's duffel bag. And there was no gloating in that fleeting glance. There was understanding. "Pavel, can you hear me? Sister? Mom!" The voice on the line broke with a sob. Pavel Smirnov was standing in his office, reeking of printing ink and government paper, and looking at the neatly stacked piles of orders. The world, so understandable and ordered just a minute ago, had shattered into millions of sharp, cutting fragments. The phone, an old button Nokia he hid from the officers, felt red-hot. He silently pressed the end call button. "Mom!" That word, warm and familiar, now hit him in the gut, knocking the air out of him. He leaned his forehead against the cold metal rack. There were no thoughts in his head, only a dull, panicked ringing. Dying. That word didn't fit in his consciousness. It was alien, impossible, like an order to disband the army. His mother, who baked the best cabbage pies in the world, who always knew when he was feeling bad, even if he didn't say anything. Dying. The clerk's instinct was the first to kick in. Problem? Need a solution. Official one. He burst out of the supply room, nearly knocking over the duty NCO, and, ignoring the NCO's shout, he dashed down the corridor towards the company headquarters. His usually impeccably pressed uniform was crumpled. His perfectly polished boots clattered against the linoleum in a frantic, erratic rhythm. "Comrade Captain! Permission to speak!" he blurted out, bursting into the office without knocking. The company commander, a captain of about 35 with tired eyes, looked up from his monitor. He valued Smirnov for his diligence and almost calligraphic handwriting. "What's happened, Smirnov? A fire?" "Negative, Comrade Captain. My mother is dying. I need to go home. Immediately." Pavel tried to speak calmly, according to regulations, but his voice trembled betrayingly. He held out his phone to the captain as if it could serve as proof. The captain frowned, his gaze softening. "I'm sorry to hear that, soldier. I really am, but you know the situation. In 3 weeks, the first group ships out to Syria. The unit is on high alert. All leave has been cancelled by order of the district commander. I physically can't let you go." "But it's my mother," Pavel snapped, raising his voice, and then immediately stopped, frightened by his own lack of restraint. "I apologize, Comrade Captain, but please understand. I understand everything, Smirnov. My own son is ill." The captain rubbed his temples. "But there's an order. A report for family reasons will take at least a week to go through the chain of command. Then there'll be a request to your military registration and enlistment office, confirmation from the hospital. At best, you'll get 10 days in 2 or 3 weeks. You handle the paperwork yourself. You know all this better than I do." 2 or 3 weeks. The word sounded like a death sentence. In 2 or 3 weeks, it might be too late. Everything. The end. A dead end. Pavel looked at the captain, and his polite, obliging clerk's mask was cracking. For the first time in his life, he wanted not to write a report, but to hurl that very stapler on the captain's desk at the wall. "I understand, Comrade Captain. Permission to leave?" His voice was dead, mechanical. "Go, Smirnov. Hang in there." He left the office and trudged back. His legs carried him not to the supply room, but to the Raspolaga, the general barracks. One thought pounded in his head, a terrible, forbidden thought, like breaking the military oath, unauthorized absence, going AWOL. Self-propelled. The word he himself had written into punishment orders dozens of times. A disciplinary battalion, a criminal case, disgrace. For him, the clerk, who was well regarded, it meant the collapse of everything. And most importantly, if he got caught, they'd start digging, and they'd inevitably dig up his cooperation with the special investigator. And then the disciplinary battalion would seem like paradise compared to what they'd do to him in the barracks. He entered the barracks. The familiar smell of sweat, gun oil, and shoe polish hung in the air. In the far corner, in the sports area, Sergei Popov, a contract soldier nicknamed the Jock, was dropping a heavy kettlebell onto the rubber mat with a dull thud. His muscles rippled under his faded army t-shirt. Nearby on a bench sat Timur Karimov, silent and predatory, like a bird of prey. He was cleaning a knife, and the blade glinted menacingly in the lamplight. These were people from another world, a world of strength, risk, and unwritten laws. People who despised him. The office rat. It was they who, just a week ago, had held a meeting in the smoking room. Pavel, passing by, had overheard fragments of phrases. "There's a rat in the company. He's leaking everything to the special investigator. If we find him, we'll bury him." His heart had sunk to his boots. He knew who they were talking about. He, Pavel Smirnov, was that rat. He didn't consider it betrayal. It was his way of surviving. The special investigator, Major Dmitrenko, had promised him a green light after his service, a good reference. In return, he asked for a little, to report on the mood in the company, who was drinking, who was planning to fake sick, who was dissatisfied with their contract. Small things. But for these guys, it was the worst of sins. And now he, the snitch, had to go to them, to those who were looking for him, because only they, and not the staff officers, knew how to go AWOL and return unnoticed. He forced himself to take a step, then another. His legs turned to jelly. He walked across the barracks to the sports area, and conversations died down behind him. Each step was like walking through a minefield. He felt dozens of eyes on him. Sergei Popov put the kettlebell down and, breathing heavily, wiped the sweat from his face. He looked at Pavel with undisguised contempt. "What do you want, clerk? Bring an order. Or did you come to snitch on someone for not putting the kettlebell down right?" Timur Karamov stopped sharpening his knife and raised cold, expressionless eyes to Pavel. In this silence, his gaze was more frightening than any scream. Pavel swallowed. All his feigned politeness, all his office arrogance fell away like husks. In front of them stood not Smirnov the clerk, but just a frightened kid. I need help," he croaked. Sergei Popov smirked. "Help? You? Your help for yourself." Ran to the company commander, peeked in on the special investigator. "And everything's hunky-dory. What kind of help could you possibly need from us? From unpolished cattle?" "My mother is dying." The words burst out themselves, quiet and desperate. "The company commander won't let me go. Orders, I want to go AWOL." A deafening silence fell in the sports area. Even the creaking of springs on the neighboring cot, where Viktor Morozov was tossing and turning, ceased. Sergei Popov stopped smirking. He gave Pavel a long, scrutinizing look, trying to figure out if he was lying or not. "Everyone's mother dies when they want to get out," he finally drawled, but without his former mockery. "I'm not lying." Pavel's voice cracked. He pulled out his phone and with trembling fingers found the last message from his sister. "Pasha, Mom is very ill. The doctors said a few days, maybe. Come if you can. I beg you." He held out the phone to Sergei. He took the device disdainfully with 2 fingers. He read it. His face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He silently handed the phone back. Timur Karimov, who had been watching Pavel intently all this time, suddenly said quietly, "Going AWOL before deployment is a court-martial, clerk. You know that, right?" "I know." Pavel nodded. His head was clearer than ever. The fear of the barracks, of being exposed, of a court-martial, all of that suddenly seemed petty and insignificant compared to the thought that he might be too late. "I don't care." Sergei Popov walked around him, looked him in the eye. He was huge, and he smelled of iron and sweat. Pavel didn't look away. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel small and insignificant next to the muscle man. He felt only desperate conviction. "Do you even know how to do it?" Sergei asked in a different tone now, businesslike and harsh. "You've never been outside the base perimeter without an escort. The first patrol at the checkpoint will pick you up." "That's why I came to you," Pavel replied simply. Sergei looked at Timur. He shrugged almost imperceptibly. Neither yes nor no. It was their language, which Pavel didn't understand. Tension hung in the air. His fate was being decided, and not only his. To help him meant becoming an accomplice. For the contract soldiers, who had their careers and a trip to Syria with its combat pay and triple salaries on the line, it was a huge risk. "All right then, desk jockey," Sergei Popov finally said, and Pavel didn't wince at the address. "This is a rotten deal. Very. If you get caught, you'll rat everyone out. We know that." Pavel was silent. He couldn't promise that he wouldn't rat them out. Under pressure, he might break. He knew it himself. "But," Sergei continued, and that "but" sounded louder than a gunshot, "if your mother really is. My own father passed away a year ago. I didn't make it. I was here, on exercises." He turned to the window, and for a moment such longing was visible in his broad back that Pavel felt a pang of shame for his past arrogance. They were all the same hostages of circumstances here. "Let us think about it," Sergei threw over his shoulder. "Go to your storage room, and not a soul is to know about this conversation. Understood? If anyone gets wind of it, we'll turn you in to the special services ourselves for attempting to destabilize the situation in the company. You know the wording, clerk." Pavel nodded silently. He turned and walked back to his door. He could feel two gazes on his back, Sergei's heavy, direct gaze and Timur's sharp, knife-like gaze, boring into the back of his head. He went into the storage room and closed the door behind him. He collapsed onto a stool. His heart was pounding like crazy. He had taken the riskiest step of his life. He, the snitch, had asked for help from those who hated him and hunted him. He had staked everything, his pathetic safety, his deal with the special services, his freedom. He put it all on one single chance, a chance to say, "I'm sorry and I love you," in time. He looked at the stack of fresh orders. One of them, printed by him just an hour ago, had the name Popov S.A. on it. The order to appoint him as the leader of the group leaving for Syria, and he understood what Sergei was risking, and why his silent, "let us think about it," was worth more than 1,000 oaths. For the first time in his service, Pavel Smirnov felt not like a staff unit, but like part of something bigger, part of this smoke-filled, sweat-soaked barracks, and that was scarier and more important than anything that had happened to him before that day. He waited. He waited for their decision, like waiting for a sentence or a pardon. The leave form lay on the table like a sentence. Not for him, for the system. Pavel Smirnov, the headquarters clerk, stared at the even columns printed typographically. Grounds, duration, signature of the unit commander. Each word was a fortress wall that he was going to break through from the inside. His weapons were not an assault rifle or a bayonet, but calligraphic handwriting and a thorough knowledge of the bureaucratic machine. He could forge the handwriting of the company commander, the battalion commander, and even Colonel Orlov himself, whose name inspired trepidation throughout the unit. For weeks he had studied their signatures on orders, duty rosters, and reports. He knew where the major put a thick dot, and where the lieutenant colonel's hand trembled after an evening meeting. His fingers, accustomed to the keyboard and ballpoint pen, trembled slightly. This was not like compiling a fuel consumption report or printing lists for commendation. This was forging a pass into another life. To where, in an old panel 5-story building, in a room with faded wallpaper, the only person dear to him was fading away. His mother. The sister's last call resounded in his ears like an alarm bell. "Pasha, the doctors say, days, weeks, if you're lucky. She keeps whispering your name." The report for family reasons, submitted according to all regulations, came back with the resolution,
Denied due to the complex operational situation. Complex situation. Exercises. Preparations for sending a new contingent to Syria. Constant inspections from the district. His mother didn't fit into this situation. She was an uncounted statistical error. Smirnov, hiding behind your paperwork again. A wheedling voice came from behind. Pavel started so violently that the pen scratched across the clean form, leaving a thin blue line. He slowly turned around. In the doorway of the storeroom, leaning against the jamb, stood Viktor Morozov, a private with shifty eyes and a perpetual, obsequious smile that the entire company despised. They didn't beat him, but shunned him as something sticky and unpleasant. Rumor had it that he was the one who leaked information to the special department officer about unauthorized relationships, left phones, and those who talked too much in the smoking area. Snitch. This label was invisible, but felt by everyone. Working, Morozov, unlike some, Pavel said coldly, covering the form with a folder labeled Incoming. His usual manner. A slight arrogance towards the ordinary infantrymen. He was a staff man, almost an intellectual. They were boots. Working. Viktor drawled, not taking his eyes off him. He stepped inside, and the door closed quietly behind him. The smell of unwashed uniform and cheap soap grew stronger. And I see your work is stressful. Your hands are shaking. You must be entrusted with state secrets. Pavel felt a chill run down his spine. Morozov wasn't a fool.
He was observant and vindictive. What do you want, Morozov? If you want to get out of duty, go to the sergeant major. My resource isn't unlimited. No duty. Viktor moved closer, peering over Pavel's shoulder. I'm just curious. Everyone's running around here like crazy, preparing for the inspection. And Clerk Smirnov is sitting here drawing up leave passes for himself. Interesting, isn't it? Pavel's heart plummeted somewhere into the area of his jackboots. He was caught, so stupidly and ineptly. Are you out of your mind? Pavel tried to protest, but his voice sounded uncertain. It's a form for a report. Oh, really? Morozov smirked, and his face became unpleasantly predatory. And whose handwriting are you practicing? Major Popov's? I saw you copying his squiggles on drafts. Thought no one would notice? I notice everything, Smirnov. I am the eyes and ears of this barracks. Pavel was silent, racking his brains. Shout? Useless. Hit him. He, a clerk, against anyone, even the lowliest line soldier, was like a violin against a sledgehammer. Only one thing remained, to negotiate or threaten. What do you want? He asked, trying to keep his voice even. Want? Viktor Morozov sat on the corner of the table, sweeping a stack of papers aside. I want justice. You sit here, in the warmth, behind your papers. We're driven to the training ground, up to our ears in mud. And you're going home, under your mommy's wing? Unfair. I think the major will be very surprised when he finds out about your artistic talents. And the special department officer, Captain Solovey, will be thrilled. Forgery of documents, unauthorized absence from the unit during a period of heightened alert. That, my friend, is not a disciplinary battalion. That's a tribunal. Pavel felt his mouth go dry. A tribunal. The end of everything. He wouldn't see his mother. Ever. They certainly wouldn't release him from prison to see her. The despair was so strong that for a moment he wanted to just get up and smash this bastard's face in and let whatever happens happen. But he held back. How much? He squeezed out. Viktor Morozov laughed a quiet, nasty laugh. It's not about money, Smirnov, although it wouldn't hurt. I want you to work for me. As a clerk, you'll leak information to me. Who's going on duty? Who they want to put in the guardhouse? What inspections are planned? You'll be my personal reference service, and you'll give me your left phone, and your bank card for a while, and I, so be it, will forget about your leave pass, for now. It was worse than just informing. It was slavery, to become a flunky for the barracks snitch. Pavel Smirnov, who had always kept to himself, who despised this gray mass, was to become its dirtiest element. "I'll think about it," he replied dully, knowing it was a lie. He would never agree. "Think faster." Morozov stood up. "You have until evening roll call. If you don't come with a proposal, I'm going to the special department officer. And bear in mind, Smirnov, if you try to double-cross me or tell anyone, I'll make sure your unauthorized absence is classified as desertion with weapons. I have connections for that too." The door slammed shut. Pavel was left alone in the deafening silence of his storeroom. The plan had collapsed. Everything had collapsed. He dropped his head into his hands onto the stack of now useless papers. Tears of anger and helplessness burned his eyes. He was trapped, and there was no way out of it. Evening roll call passed as if in a fog. Pavel stood in formation, mechanically shouting, "Here!" when the sergeant major called his name. One thought was pounding in his head. Morozov. What to do? Go begging? Or risk everything, hoping the snitch is bluffing? But he wasn't bluffing. Pavel could feel it. Guys like Morozov don't bluff. They get off on having power over others. After inspection, when the company scattered to their own affairs, some to the washroom, some to the smoking area, some to the TV, Pavel went outside. The cold November air brought him to his senses a little. He wandered aimlessly along the parade ground when he was hailed from the smoking area, a pathetic mushroom shape surrounded by cigarette butts. "Hey, scribe, come over here for a sec." The voice belonged to Sergei Popov, known in the company as Muscle Man. A contract soldier, former Marine, he was the unofficial leader among the old-timers and contract soldiers. Huge, calm as a rock, he rarely raised his voice, but his words carried weight. Next to him, leaning against a post, stood Timur Karimov, a conscript, like Pavel, but from the combat arms. Smart, sharp-tongued, with a reputation for being quick to bite back. Pavel didn't like them. They embodied everything he avoided: brute force, training ranges, army straightforwardness. They, in turn, responded to him with disdainful indifference. Pavel approached, keeping his distance. "Did you want something, Sergeant?" Sergei Popov took a drag and blew out a thick cloud of smoke. "You're not yourself today, Smirnov. Pale, like you stole a ruble from a corpse, and Morozov's buzzing around you like a fly over... Well, you get the idea. What's going on between you two?" Pavel tensed. Telling them was the last thing he wanted to do. They'd laugh. Say the desk jockey got himself into a mess. "Nothing special. Work stuff," he tossed off. Timur Karimov smirked. "Work stuff?" Morozov came out of your clerk's office with a look on his face like he'd been promised general stars, and you were sitting there looking like you'd been hit with a sack of dust. Don't take us for idiots, scribe. Spill it. What does he want from you? That jackal doesn't bark for nothing. Something in their tone was off. There was none of the usual mockery. There was curiosity, and maybe something else. Pavel hesitated. He had nothing left to lose. The AWOL plan had failed. Ahead lay either a court-martial or slavery to Morozov. He saw, Pavel said dully, looking at the ground. He saw me, preparing myself a leave pass, a left-handed one. Silence fell in the smoking area. Even the wind seemed to quiet down. Muscle Man slowly turned his head towards him. His face was unreadable. "AWOL?" he asked briefly. "Yes." "Why?" There was no condemnation in Sergei's voice, just a question. "Girlfriend dump you? Need to make some money?"
And then Pavel broke. All the arrogance, all his staff office swagger, fell away like husks. Standing before them was not a cunning scribe, but a desperately frightened kid. "My mother," he breathed, and his voice trembled treacherously. "My mother's dying. Cancer. My sister called. Said she only has days left. I filed a report. Denied. Said, situation. And she's there alone, almost waiting for me. I only wanted 3 days, there and back, just to say goodbye, to see her. And that Morozov, he saw everything. Now he's blackmailing me, wants me to work for him, to snitch, or he'll turn it all over to the special department." He fell silent, swallowing hard to clear the lump in his throat. He expected anything: mockery, contempt, the phrase, "You brought it on yourself." But Musselman and Timur were silent. Sergei Popov finished his cigarette, threw the butt into the bin and looked at Timur. He nodded. "All right, scribe," said Musselman in a surprisingly calm, businesslike tone. "Your plan is crap. You would have been busted at the checkpoint. You've got 'I'm going AWOL, I'm very scared' written all over your good student face." "But I have no other choice," Pavel exclaimed in despair. "Now you do." Timur Karimov interrupted him. He came closer. There was no pity or sympathy in his dark eyes. There was cold determination. "First, we'll take care of Morozov. That's our concern. Second, your plan needs to be reworked. You need a car. You need civilian clothes. You need an alibi. And you need someone to cover your ass here." Pavel looked at them, not understanding anything. Musselman, who had always called him a paper worm. Timur, with whom they hadn't exchanged even a couple of words during their entire service. Why were they doing this? Why? Was all he could manage to say. Sergei Popov put his heavy, like a weight hand on his shoulder. "Because, scribe, you don't go AWOL to see your mothers. You go on orders. And if the commanders don't understand that, then we'll become commanders for a while. And because there shouldn't be any snitches in the barracks. Never. It pollutes the air." He looked towards the barracks, where Viktor Morozov's silhouette flashed in one of the windows. "Timur, find that operator. Bring him to the drying room. Tell him Smirnov agreed to his terms, wants to discuss the details. And you," he turned back to Pavel, "go to the barracks. Lie on your bunk and pretend to be asleep. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. This is no longer your war. It's ours." Pavel Smirnov, scribe, expert in regulations and orders, understood for the first time in his entire service what true military brotherhood was. It didn't smell of printer's ink and office glue. It smelled of cheap cigarettes, the cold of the night parade ground, and the readiness of unfamiliar people to risk everything for a simple and understandable thing that couldn't be prescribed in any regulation. He nodded and, without saying a word, went to the barracks. He didn't know what they were going to do with Morozov, and he was afraid to imagine. But for the first time in the last 24 hours, he felt a glimmer of hope, a faint, desperate hope, but hope nonetheless. He would get there. He had to get there. Precisely at 2:00. Viktor Morozov's voice was quiet, but as persistent as a dentist's drill. He traced a line on the dusty windowsill of the drying room where they had hidden from prying ears. "The military police patrol leaves this sector for the far perimeter, towards the fuel and lubricants depot. They have a changing of the guard there. The window is exactly 12 minutes. Captain Orlov, the officer of the day, always drinks tea in his cubicle at that time. I personally gave him 3 packs of Princess Nuri tea yesterday. He likes it with lemon." Sergei Popov, as massive as a wardrobe, nicknamed the Jock, grunted skeptically, crossing his hammer-like arms over his chest.
The smell of damp laundry and chlorine in the drying room seemed to make him even gloomier. Sounds too smooth, scribe, too damn smooth. Your paperwork is one thing, but the real fence with barbed wire is another. What if your captain doesn't want tea today? Or what if the patrol decides to take an extra lap? They won't, Victor snapped. His usual office courtesy had vanished, leaving only a taut, string-like nerve. His narrow eyes were piercing. I know the schedule. I drew it up myself 3 weeks ago. They follow it like trains, down to the second. Timur Karimov, wiry and quick as a lizard, leaned against the wall. He remained silent, but his dark eyes intently scanned Victor's face, weighing every syllable. Let's say you're right, he finally said. You get past the fence. Then what? It's 20 kilometers to the train station. It's nighttime. You can't call a taxi here. Pavel Smirnov arranged it, Victor blurted out, lowering his voice to a whisper. Through his cousin. A gray Lada 10 will be waiting at the turn to the old boiler house at 20:15. The driver knows. I transferred the money to his card. Mine from civilian life is still there. The jock whistled. You've spun quite a web, Morozov. A desk rat with a bulldog's grip. But you've forgotten about the main thing. About our mutual friend. The snitch. He's probably already bending the ear of the special department officer in his office, telling him how Scribe Morozov is planning an unauthorized leave. The air in the drying room became heavy and dense. This was the weakest point of the plan, an invisible enemy who had already turned in 2 from their company for minor phone infractions. The fear of him was stronger than the fear of officers. An officer will punish according to regulations. Barracks' revenge was far worse. Victor gave a crooked smile. Something malicious and calculating flashed in his eyes for a moment. And I haven't forgotten about him. I am the scribe. I work with information. He paused, savoring the effect. Remember Private Solovyov from the 3rd Company, the one who's always stuck on kitchen duty? 2 weeks ago, I accidentally left a draft of an award order on the company commander's desk, with Solovyov's name written next to a thank you from the head of the special department. The paper didn't go anywhere, of course, but 3 people saw it, and the rumor started circulating, and yesterday evening I slipped a new packaged SIM card into his nightstand. The ones the special department usually gives to their informants. They've already found it. Right now, his whole company is grilling him, so our friend is very busy today, proving that he's not a camel. We have a head start. Sergei Popov and Timur Karimov exchanged glances. Their expressions were a mixture of disgust and grudging respect. This quiet, polite office scribe, whom they had despised for his easy service, had turned out to be capable of such a cold and cruel intrigue. He hadn't just created a cover. He had coldly set up another soldier to save his own skin. You son of a bitch, Morozov. The jock slowly exhaled, but there was no threat in his voice. Rather, a shocked acknowledgement. A real son of a bitch. My mother is dying, Victor said quietly but distinctly, as if hammering nails. His face momentarily lost all its arrogance, becoming defenseless and pitiable. I don't care what I am, a son of a bitch, a creature, a traitor. I need to see her. Just hug her while she's still breathing. That confession pierced the jock's armor. He sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his head with his powerful hand. All right, forget it. A plan's a plan. What's my job? You and Timur go to the gym area, Victor said quickly, regaining his businesslike tone. Exactly at 1:50, and start pumping iron, loudly, so that the clang is heard throughout the barracks. Smirnov will come to you and give the signal when I leave the premises. If something goes wrong, if you get noticed, just keep working out. You have nothing to do with it. You just decided to flex your muscles at night. That'll distract the duty officer. Got it, Timur nodded. Create a noise screen. Exactly, and I'm going to the medical bay. I have a sick leave certificate that I wrote myself yesterday, supposedly a migraine. From there, through the back door, to the fence. Pavel will be waiting for me at the hole. He'll show me where the wires are de-energized. And he'll make sure I get away clean. What if you get caught? Kachek asked bluntly. Then I don't know any of you, Victor replied firmly, looking him in the eye. I acted alone. You were just lifting weights. Pavel was just taking a walk. Got it? Got it, Sergei grumbled. Go, and good luck, Morozov. The clock on the wall in the office read 1:48 a.m. Victor was sitting at his desk, pretending to sort through papers. His hands were trembling slightly. He felt naked under the gazes of dozens of eyes, even though he was alone in the room. Every creak of the floorboards in the hallway made his heart plummet. He took a photograph from under a pile of papers. A young, smiling woman with the same narrow eyes as his. Mom. His sister's last call echoed in his ears like a funeral knell. The doctors said, maybe a week, maybe a few days. She keeps calling for you, Vitya. He couldn't get leave. Not authorized, Private Morozov. Insufficient grounds. The death hasn't occurred. Once it has, then submit a report for family leave. The cold words of Lieutenant Colonel Sidorov, the chief of staff, sounded like a death sentence. The system was indifferent. And then Victor realized he would fight the system with its own weapons. Lies, paperwork, and calculation. 1:50 a.m. Time. He stood up, neatly stacked the papers, pushed in the chair. He walked down the echoing barracks hallway. Muffled laughter came from the smoking room. Someone was splashing in the washroom. Ordinary nighttime life in the unit. He nodded to the duty officer, who was sleepily nodding off by his stand, and turned towards the staircase leading to the infirmary. Where to, Morozov? A sleepy voice called after him.
To the medical unit. Victor tossed back without turning around. Killer headache. I have a note. The duty officer mumbled something unintelligible in response and fell silent again. The infirmary was empty. The duty medic, an elderly warrant officer, was asleep in his cubicle. Victor tiptoed past, pushed open the creaking back door, and found himself outside. The night smelled of damp earth and fuel oil. In the distance, from the direction of the sports corner, came a distinct metallic clang, a barbell falling onto the supports. Kachek and Timur had begun their part. Victor ran, crouching, along the wall of the building, darting from one shadow to another. His staff boots felt like lead weights, his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He crossed the parade ground, keeping in the shadow of the reviewing stand, and headed for the far section of the fence, where, according to Pavel Smirnov, there was a loophole. Here it was. Several bars in the concrete barrier had been carefully sawn through and were held in place by a thread. Nearby, leaning against a post, stood a figure. Pavel Smirnov. All clear? Victor whispered, breathless. Clear as a whistle, Pavel replied with a smile. The patrol left 5 minutes ago. The captain's in his hole. Go, you don't have much time. I'll cover you. Victor nodded gratefully. He hadn't expected such help from Smirnov, a quiet and unassuming guy who always kept to himself. But it was Pavel himself who volunteered to help when he overheard a snippet of conversation about his sick mother. Said his own father had been ill, and he understood everything. Victor squeezed through the narrow opening. The barbed wire on top scratched his jacket unpleasantly. Another second, and he was free. He was almost out on the other side when he heard Pavel's calm voice behind him. Stay where you are, Morozov. Don't move. Victor froze. Something in Smirnov's tone made his blood run cold. He slowly turned around. Pavel was standing in the same place, but in his hand he held a phone. The screen glowed in the darkness. He wasn't calling. He was recording. What? "What are you doing?" Victor croaked. "Carrying out my duty, Private Morozov." There wasn't a trace of sympathy in Pavel's voice, only cold, businesslike satisfaction. Attempted unauthorized absence from the unit, a group of persons in prior conspiracy, video recording available. At that moment, a military police patrol car pulled out from around the corner of the boiler room. Its headlights were off. It moved almost silently. The door opened, and Captain Orlov stepped out, the very same one who was supposed to be drinking tea with lemon. He didn't look surprised. "Gotcha, my boy," the captain said wearily, approaching closer. "I was just waiting for you, scribe, to decide you were smarter than everyone else. And you, Smirnov, good job. Didn't let me down. Report for a commendation on my desk tomorrow." Victor looked from the captain to Pavel. The puzzle fell into place, cold, ugly, merciless. There was no Soloviev, or rather, he existed, but only as a distraction. The real snitch, the very rat that everyone was looking for, was him, Pavel Smirnov, quiet, unassuming, understanding. He didn't just turn him in, he helped him plan the escape, gained his trust, in order to then triumphantly slam the trap shut. Why? That was all Victor could squeeze out. His world was collapsing. The plan, so perfect on paper, crumbled into dust. His mother. He wouldn't see his mother. "Because it's the right thing to do," Pavel shrugged, putting away the phone. "There's a charter, there's order, and then there are those like you who think they're allowed more than everyone else. You sat in the warmth while others sweated in the fields, and now you've decided that the laws don't apply to you either. No, Morozov, not in this army." Two soldiers from the patrol were already twisting Victor's arms behind his back. He didn't resist. It was all over. The disciplinary battalion, prison, shame, and the worst thing, he wouldn't even get to say goodbye to his mother. As they led him to the car, he saw two figures dart out from behind the corner of the sports area, the jock and Timur. They froze, taking in the scene. Fury was etched on Sergei Popov's face. He took a step forward, clenching his fists, but Timur grabbed his arm, whispering something quickly. Victor met the jock's gaze. In the eyes of the battle-hardened soldier who had despised him that very morning, there was no gloating, only rage and something akin to pity. "I'm the only one, Comrade Captain!" Victor shouted loudly, cutting through the nighttime silence and drowning out the engine's hum. "They're not involved! I deceived them!" Captain Orlov simply waved his hand dismissively. "We'll sort it out. Everyone to the guardhouse. Until morning." The door of the UAZ slammed shut. The cramped darkness smelled of iron and despair. Victor Morozov, the headquarters clerk, the most informed soldier in the unit, sat staring into the void. His grand plan, his cold calculation, his last hope, all turned to ashes. He had lost, and the price of that loss was worse than any disciplinary battalion. He would never see his mother's smile again. Victor Morozov wasn't beaten. He was simply shoved into the storage room, and the heavy door, with the clang of the sliding bolt, cut him off from the rest of the barracks. Inside, it smelled of broadcloth, shoe polish, and stale sweat, the eternal, ineradicable aroma of army life, which he, the clerk, had almost forgotten in the sterile coolness of headquarters. Sergei Popov, the jock, was sitting on a stool by a shelf piled high with old greatcoats. He wasn't looking at Victor. He was methodically, with a chilling calm, cleaning his rifle, disassembled on a piece of oiled cloth. The movements were precise, economical, like those of a surgeon. Every click of metal, every scraping of the cleaning rod echoed deafeningly in the resonant silence of the storage room. Victor stood in the middle of the room, not knowing what to do with his hands. The uniform hung on him like a sack.
The civilian clothes he had been wearing when the patrols picked him up at the train station in his hometown were somewhere in the commandant's office. 2 days in the hole, interrogations, the contemptuous glances of the guards, and here he was, back in his company, a living ghost. He was expecting shouts, accusations, maybe even a blow. But the jock's silence was worse than any shout. "We need to talk, Popov." Victor's voice sounded hoarse and uncertain. The former clerkly arrogance he had so relished had vanished without a trace. Sergei Popov slowly raised his head. His light, almost colorless eyes looked at Victor without hatred, with a cold, detached curiosity, as if looking at an insect under glass. "And what is there to talk about with you, Morozov?" The jock put down the cleaning rod and picked up the bolt carrier. "You've already said everything. Not to us, though. To Captain Smirnov." Victor's heart skipped a beat and then hammered somewhere in his throat, making it hard to breathe. Captain Smirnov. The security officer. The polite one, with intelligent eyes and a soft smile, who called him into his office once a week to clarify personnel lists. "I don't understand what you're talking about," Victor squeezed out. The lie was weak, pathetic, and he knew it himself. "Don't understand?" Sergei smirked, but the corners of his lips barely twitched. "You're smart, clerk. You read books, you shuffle papers, and we're stupid, right? Meat. Brainless jocks. You think we don't see? You think we can't put 2 and 2 together?" He stood up, short, but incredibly dense, stocky, like a cast-iron weight. He approached Victor closely. He smelled of gun oil and the gym. Timur's cigarettes disappeared from his bedside table. A trifle. 2 days later, the security officer is shaking him down. Where did he get the extra SIM card? Timur clams up like a partisan, gets 2 extra duties. Who knew that he was chatting with his girl on a burner phone in the evening? Only you, because he bragged to you about what a genius you were for helping him sneak the phone in after lights out. Victor was silent, feeling the icy sweat trickling down his back. "Next," continued the jock, without raising his voice. "Pavel Smirnov. Oh, excuse me, his namesake, our Pasha, had money disappear from his card. Not much, 1,500 rubles. He didn't file a report. We all know what that would lead to. But he dictated his card number to his sister on the phone. Where? In the smoking room. And who was standing nearby pretending to mess with his phone? Clerk Morozov, who always has his ears on the ground. A week later, the security officer calls Pasha in and, just in passing, asks if he plays online casinos. Coincidence? Each example was like a punch to the gut. Victor remembered these moments. He didn't consider it betrayal. He considered it information, currency. He fed Smirnov trivialities, everyday garbage, and in return he got the opportunity to call home off schedule, an extra hour of sleep, protection from extra duties. He thought it didn't matter. Cigarettes, SIM cards, conversations. He never thought that these streams would form a whole river of shit that was now drowning him. My mother, he began, playing what he thought was his only trump card. Everyone has a mother, Sergei snapped. A metallic edge crept into his voice. Everyone. Timur's mother is raising 2 kids by herself. Pashka's father is bedridden after a stroke, but they don't run and snitch on their own to get their mother an extra phone call. They endure it, because we're all in the same boat here, or were, until a rat infested it. Rat. The word struck him like a slap in the face. In the barracks hierarchy, it was a death sentence, worse than untouchable. It was a brand that couldn't be erased. You don't understand, Victor whispered. She's dying. Cancer. The doctor said weeks. I had to see her. I requested compassionate leave. They refused. Said I needed an official document with a seal, and by the time it arrived, and you ran, the jock finished for him, and they caught you at the first train station, like a kid. Why, Morozov? You're smart. You know all the angles. You should have known your mug would be plastered all over the stations and checkpoints within an hour. Why were you so stupid? Victor looked at him, and suddenly everything clicked into place in his mind. The puzzle he couldn't solve. Why had the patrol in his hometown, 1,000 kilometers from the unit, gone directly to his building? Why were they waiting for him there?
He sold me out, Victor breathed.
Smirnov. Sergei Popov grinned crookedly. Bingo, scribe. You finally figured it out. Why would he need a witness, an accomplice who'd spun out of control? You became a problem. You deserted. That's an emergency for the unit. The easiest thing was to find you quickly, bring you back, and make an example of you. Close the case, and a new scribe will do the dirty work. Nature abhors a vacuum. The jock stepped back and sat down on the stool again. We were thinking about what to do with you. The way we do things. The barracks way. There were different suggestions. But then we decided, why bother? The system will devour you anyway. The brig. A couple of extra years. You'll come back with no job, no future. That'll be the best gift for your mother, right? To see her son, a convicted criminal, before she dies. Victor slid down the wall and sat on the floor. It was all over. His cunning plan, his small deals with his conscience, his illusion of control over the situation, it had all crumbled to dust. He had betrayed his comrades for his mother, and in the end, he had gotten nothing. He hadn't seen his mother. He had become a traitor in the eyes of his comrades, and now he was facing a court-martial. His special status had backfired on him. He was just a used tool that had broken, and they had decided to throw him away. The bolt clanked. The door opened. Captain Pavel Smirnov stood on the threshold. The very same, in perfectly pressed fatigues, with a folder in his hands. His face expressed nothing but a slight, businesslike concern. Private Popov, step outside, he said in an even, calm voice. I have a conversation with Private Morozov. Sergei silently got up, wiped the parts of the rifle with a rag, and left without looking at Victor. The door closed again, but this time the bolt wasn't touched. Smirnov walked to the center of the supply room, looking around with a slight air of disgust. Stand up, Private, he said, without even looking at Victor. Victor struggled to his feet. His legs were like jelly. You don't look good, Morozov. The guardhouse didn't do you any favors. Smirnov opened the folder. I have 2 pieces of news for you. As usual, a good one and a bad one. Which one do you want to start with? Victor was silent. He didn't care. Let's start with the bad one, the captain decided for him. Your case has been handed over to the prosecutor's office. Article 337, Part 4. Unauthorized absence from the unit for more than a month. 3 to 5 years. Considering the circumstances, desertion, apprehension, you won't get less than 5. The disciplinary battalion is out of the question. A full-fledged penal colony. 5 years. The word fell into the silence of the supply room like a stone into a well. 5 years. He'd get out when he was 30. His mother, she definitely wouldn't wait. He wouldn't even be able to attend her funeral. Everything swam before his eyes. And now for the good news. Smirnov's voice sounded just as monotonous, as if he were reading a weather report. I spoke to your attending physician this morning. Your mother's, that is. Her condition is stable but critical. The prognosis, let's say, hasn't changed, but she's conscious. She's waiting for you. Victor looked up at him, his eyes full of despair. Why was he saying this? To make it hurt more? Your case. Smirnov tapped the folder with his finger. It could get lost. Papers have a tendency to do that. You should know that as a scribe. Requests from the prosecutor's office might not arrive, and the report of your apprehension could turn into a report of your voluntary return to the unit. Then the article will be completely different. Maybe you'll even get probation, or it might be hushed up quietly. Hope, weak and illusory, stirred in Victor's soul. What? What do I have to do? Smirnov closed the folder. He looked Victor straight in the eyes. His gaze was cold and piercing, like a steel trap. Nothing special, just continue serving. But not here. You haven't exactly taken root here, as I see it. The collective hasn't accepted you. He paused, letting the words sink in. There's one place, warm, sunny, with good pay, a deployment, let's say, for 6 months, the Syrian Arab Republic. We need people with brains there, not just assault troops, staff work, analytics, working with documents. Your specialty, Morozov. Sign a contract for a year. After 6 months of this deployment, you'll come back a hero, with money, with a clean record. And nobody will ever remember your little, unauthorized leave. The case will be in the archives. Deep down, Syria. A word whispered with a mixture of awe and fear in the smoking rooms, a place from which men returned in zinc coffins or with medals, a place where desperate contract soldiers sought money and glory. And he, the clerk, who had spent his entire service hiding behind paperwork, was now supposed to go there. Are you offering me a contract? Victor croaked, hardly believing his ears. I'm offering you a choice, Morozov. Smirnov corrected him. You're a smart guy. Do the math. Option 1, 5 years in a penal colony, shame. Your mother dying knowing that her son is a criminal. Option 2, 6 months in a warm place, double pay that you can send her for treatment, for a caregiver, for whatever she needs. Return with a clean record, a chance to make it in time to see her, to help her. It wasn't a choice. It was an ultimatum. A devil's bargain where his broken life lay on one side of the scale, and deadly risk and a ghostly chance at redemption on the other. Smirnov wasn't offering him salvation. He was offering him another way to serve the system. Instead of rotting in prison as used material, he had to become useful elsewhere, in a place where the cost of a mistake wasn't extra duty, but life itself. The money. Will I be able to send her money? Immediately? Victor asked. It was the only thing that mattered. From the very first month. Smirnov nodded. Amounts she wouldn't even dream of. The best medicine, the best care. You can buy her a few more months of life, Morozov. Maybe even more. Medicine works wonders when you have money. Victor looked at his hands. Soft, white hands of a clerk that knew neither calluses from a shovel nor burns from casings. He had avoided risk his entire life, sought the easy way out, used his mind to avoid working his muscles. And now his mind had led him to a point where the only way out lay through the most terrifying thing he could imagine. He remembered Kachok's scornful face. Rat! He remembered his mother's desperate eyes in their last Skype conversation. He remembered the doctor's cold voice, and he realized that he truly had no choice. The old Victor Morozov, the cunning clerk, died in that storage room. I agree, he said firmly, surprised by his own voice. There was no fear, no doubt in it, only a dull, cold resolve. Captain Smirnov smiled almost imperceptibly. I had no doubt in you, Private. The paperwork will be ready by morning. Pack your things. And yes, Morozov, welcome to the professional army.
Is everything in place? Timur Karamov's whisper was barely audible in the thick air of the barracks, saturated with the smell of foot wraps and gun oil. Pavel Smirnov, without straightening up, continued frantically pulling the blanket over his cot, aligning the edge with almost insane precision. His hands, accustomed to the smoothness of paper and the clicks of the keyboard, were trembling. 3 days. 72 hours of absence that his fellow soldiers had turned into a legend about severe food poisoning from stale canned stew at the canteen. A legend that could crumble at any second. He didn't answer, just frantically smoothed out a non-existent wrinkle. The air felt electrified. Every creak of the bed, every cough in the far corner of the location echoed like an alarm bell in his head. He had returned an hour ago, slipping through a hole in the fence behind the motor pool, like the lowest-ranking recruit, not like the respected clerk of the battalion headquarters. "Pash, I'm asking," Timur whispered more insistently, sitting down on the next cot. "Did you make it? Your mother, how is she?" Pavel froze. The image of his mother, emaciated, with parchment skin and almost transparent eyes on a hospital bed, appeared before him so clearly as if she were here, in this stuffy barracks. He made it. He had managed to hold her hand, hear a weak, faltering whisper, say what he hadn't had time to say for years. He nodded, unable to utter a word. His throat tightened in spasm. "Thank God," Timur breathed out. "So it wasn't for nothing. Listen up. Popov is on duty for the company. He'll be back in an hour. He covered for you at evening roll call. Told the company commander that you were in the medical bay on an IV drip, and Doc confirmed it. I arranged it. He entered you in the sick book. But the morning duty roster has already been handed in to headquarters. I don't know what's there. You have to look yourself. If it says in the medical bay, we're in the clear. If it's a dash or, God forbid, AWOL, absent without leave," Pavel finished for him in a dead voice. "Disciplinary battalion, at best. At worst, a criminal case, especially in their unit, which was constantly being dragged on deployments and where discipline was monitored by a special agent with the eyes of a dead fish and the grip of a pit bull." "Go to headquarters," Timur urged. "Your pass is still valid. Pretend you're feeling better, and you came to finish some work. Check the roster. If anything, try to fix it. You're the clerk. You can do it." The arrogant smirk with which Pavel Smirnov usually spoke about his abilities was nowhere to be seen now. He, the fixer of headquarters, who could lose an unwanted report or find a place on the list for a bonus, felt naked and defenseless. His connections, his knowledge of the bureaucratic machine, all of it seemed like dust compared to one single entry made by the duty officer. I'll be right there," he mumbled, throwing on his tunic. The walk to headquarters, which he usually took with a leisurely air, turned into a dash from shadow to shadow. The parade ground was empty and echoing. Light was only on in the duty officer's window and in headquarters. His heart pounded against his ribs like a trapped bird. He walked past the orderly at the entrance, giving a casual nod as he always did. "Comrade Private, I need to get to my office. Prepare some documents for tomorrow." The rookie soldier looked at him with sleepy eyes and silently stepped aside. The office greeted him with the smell of paper and toner. His world, his fortress. With trembling fingers, he turned on the desk lamp, pulling neat stacks of folders from the twilight. On the duty officer's desk lay a fresh log, and next to it, a duty roster, a thin sheet of paper determining his fate. He grabbed it. A list of the battalion's personnel, last name, initials, next to his name, Smirnov, P.A., was neatly written in ink. AWOL. Unauthorized absence. The blood drained from his face. It wasn't a dash, not a mistake. It was a sentence.
Someone had bothered to check the infirmary and report it. The legend had collapsed. Tomorrow at 8 in the morning, this paper would be on the battalion commander's desk, and a copy would be with the Special Forces officer. The end. He slumped onto the chair. There was a ringing emptiness in his head. Mother. He remembered her smile when she saw him. She said that now she could pass away peacefully, and he, the idiot, had believed that everything would be all right, that he could deceive the system and then come back and just erase the traces. Problems, scribe? Pavel flinched and turned sharply. In the doorway of his office, leaning against the frame, stood Viktor Morozov. He wasn't in uniform, just a striped undershirt and sweatpants. A lazy, predatory smirk played on his face. The same Morozov who always hung around the Special Forces officer's supply room and knew more than a regular contract soldier should.
What do you want, Morozov? Pavel's voice sounded hoarse and uncertain. Oh, just came out for some air. I saw your light was on. Thought I'd check on the sick man. Viktor slowly entered the office, closing the door behind him. He walked to the desk and glanced at the duty roster in Pavel's hands. Poisoned, they say? But you look like you just got off the train. Road dust on your boots, Smirnov. You're not very good at covering your tracks. Pavel silently wanted to crumple the paper, but his hands wouldn't obey. I saw you climbing over the fence, Morozov continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. You're fast. You were here yesterday evening, and now you're already back. Did you run far? Home, maybe? To Mama? He said the last word with mocking tenderness. Pavel felt powerless rage boiling inside. It's none of your business, he hissed. It is now, Morozov smirked. He lazily poked at the abbreviation AWOL on the sheet with his finger. You know who reported this to the captain? While your buddy Popov was telling him fairy tales about the infirmary, I just casually asked the duty medic, and he says Smirnov wasn't even there. The captain, of course, got angry. Ordered it to be written down as it should be. Tomorrow morning, you'll have some very interesting conversations. First with the battalion commander, then with Major Orlov. Major Orlov, the Special Forces officer. Pavel felt a chill run through him. What do you want? He breathed. I want to help. Morozov's smile widened. I'm a good guy. I understand that things happen. Mother is sacred. I can talk to the right people. Say that there was a mistake, that you were actually on the premises, just fell asleep in the drying room, and they couldn't find you. And this paper, he nodded at the note, can be lost. Write a new one, with the correct information. You know how to do that, scribe? Pavel was silent, racking his brains. This was blackmail. Dirty, direct, like a bayonet thrust. Help doesn't come cheap, of course, Morozov continued casually, examining his fingernails. You get a good salary, plus bonuses that you write for yourself. I think half of your salary until you get discharged would be a fair price for my silence. And a couple of favors. I sometimes need information from headquarters. Lists for deployments to Syria, for example. Who's going, who refused. Personal files. You'll be my eyes and ears, and then your little trip will remain our secret. Half his salary, and become his personal informant. Turn in his own guys. The guys who are currently covering his ass, the ones who chipped in for his trip. Sergei Popov, Timur. I'll think about it, Pavel squeezed out. It was all he could manage. Think fast, Morozov clapped him on the shoulder. There's not much time until the morning formation, and Major Orlov doesn't like to wait. He left, leaving Pavel alone in the deafening silence of the office. Pavel stared at the cursed paper in his hands. He could destroy it. He could forge it. But Morozov wouldn't let go. He was hooked now, He imagined giving money to this bastard every month, digging through personal files, looking for dirt on his comrades. And all this to hide what he had done for his mother. He returned to the barracks as if in a dream. Timur was waiting for him, not sleeping. "Well?" "Bad," Pavel said, sitting on his cot. "There's a special department notation, and Morozov knows everything. He saw me." Timur cursed under his breath. At that moment, the door burst open with a bang and Sergei Popov, the muscle, entered the barracks. He had just come off duty, his face tired, but his eyes sharp. He immediately noticed Pavel and Timur huddled on the cot and the tense atmosphere. "What's with the long faces?" he asked, approaching them. "Scribe, you alive?" Pavel looked up at him and, in a few jumbled sentences, recounted everything, the entry in the duty roster, the conversation with Morozov, and his conditions. Sergei listened in silence, his face hardening with each word. When Pavel finished, he said nothing. He simply turned and headed for the drying room. "Where are you going?" Timur asked, startled. "To the drying room. Need a smoke." Popov tossed over his shoulder, but there wasn't a hint of wanting to relax in his voice. There was steel in it. "Let's go," he said to Pavel. Pavel didn't want to go. He wanted to burrow under the blanket and disappear. But something in Sergei's calm confidence made him get up. Timur went with them. The drying room greeted them with a sharp smell of dampness and sweat. Under the ceiling, someone's washed undershirts and collar linings hung on ropes. In the corner, next to the cold radiator, Morozov was standing and smoking, blowing smoke out the vent. He saw them and smirked. "What's this, scribe? Brought in the heavy artillery? You think Popov's going to scare me?" Sergei Popov walked right up to him. He was half a head shorter than Morozov, but wider in the shoulders. He didn't say anything. He simply took the cigarette from Morozov's fingers, stubbed it out on the damp wall, and said very quietly, so that only the four of them could hear, "Listen here, maggot. You're walking out of here right now. You're forgetting everything you saw. You're forgetting the name Smirnov. You're forgetting about the money and your Syrian lists. You're forgetting everything, period." Morozov bared his teeth. "Or what? You gonna hit me, muscle? And we'll both end up in the brig along with Smirnov? And from there, to the disciplinary battalion? I'll have witnesses saying you started it." "I'm not going to hit you," Sergei replied, just as quietly, and Pavel felt a chill run down his spine from that calmness. "Hitting you would be dirtying my hands. I'm just going to make sure everyone in the battalion, from the newest recruit to the soon-to-be discharged, knows who you are. That you're not just a jackal who begs for money from his own, but that you're a special department snitch, a rat, and I'll tell them how you tried to profit off a man whose mother was dying. You know what they do to guys like that in the army, Morozov? They don't hit them. They just aren't. You'll eat alone, sleep alone, go on duty alone. Someone will spit in your mug, and you won't even notice. Your rifle will accidentally get clogged with mud before inspection. Your things will get lost, and that's just here. And when you get out into civilian life, it's a small world. Guys like you don't live peacefully for long. They're always looking over their shoulders." Timur stood next to Sergei, a silent wall. Morozov's face changed. The self-assured smirk slipped away, replaced first by anger, and then by poorly concealed fear. He wasn't stupid and understood that Popov's words weren't an empty threat. Getting beaten up was one thing. Becoming an official outcast, lowered, not according to prison rules, but according to human decency, was something else entirely. It was a mark for life. You're bluffing," he choked out. "Try me," Sergei shrugged. "You have 5 minutes to get to headquarters and tell the duty officer that you made a mistake, that Smirnov was found in the smoking room, and to make sure that the duty roster entry is what it needs to be by morning.
Otherwise, at 0700 hours, at roll call, the entire company will hear a very interesting story about you and about the dying mother." He uttered the last two words with icy emphasis. It was a punch to the gut, and Morozov felt it. He swallowed. His gaze darted from Sergei's impenetrable face to the grim Timur and then to Pavel. In Pavel's eyes, he saw no fear, only quiet, cold hatred and grief. And at that moment, Morozov realized that he had lost. He said nothing. He simply turned and, trying not to look them in the eye, quickly left the drawing room. They stood in silence for several seconds. Pavel felt the tension drain away, leaving behind a ringing emptiness and trembling knees. He looked at Sergei. At this simple guy, the muscle, whom he had condescendingly called a walking bicep, behind his back. Now this guy, risking everything, had saved him, not for money, not for gain, just because mother is sacred. "Thank you," Pavel whispered. The words sounded pathetic and out of place. Sergei Popov gave him a long, heavy look. "Don't thank me, scribe. Thank your mother, that she raised you to be the kind of person who's ready to do anything for her, and that—" He waved his hand in the direction Morozov had gone. "Those aren't people. That's garbage. It needs to be swept away." He pulled a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket and offered one to Pavel. "Here, have a smoke, and go to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a tough day. He'll fix the paper, but there's still going to be a conversation with the company commander. Get ready." Pavel took the cigarette. His fingers were still trembling, but not as much. He looked at the smoldering ember and, for the first time in his entire service, didn't feel like the scribe, or the headquarters elite, or anyone special. He felt like just a soldier, one of those he used to despise, and he was ready to face tomorrow, whatever it might bring. He had seen his mother's face. That was something no one could ever take from him, and now he knew he wasn't alone. Viktor Morozov sat on the edge of the metal bunk in the guardhouse cell, staring at his hands. The very hands that, just 6 months ago, knew only the smoothness of paper and the warmth of a keyboard. Now they were bruised from handcuffs, and grime was ground into the skin under his nails. The door creaked open. Major Pavel Smirnov, the chief of staff, stood on the threshold. The man to whom Viktor had recently been bringing papers for his signature, obsequiously looking into his eyes. "Stand up, Private Morozov." Smirnov's voice was even, emotionless, like a weather report. Viktor slowly rose. He expected anything: shouting, threats of a tribunal, the diesel, punishment cell. But the major entered the cell and closed the heavy door behind him. The small room filled with the scent of his expensive cologne, a jarring dissonance against the stench of chlorine and dampness. "Sit down," he nodded at the bunk. He remained standing, arms crossed over his chest. "Your documents from the hospital arrived, and the certificate from the registry office. My condolences, Morozov." Viktor nodded silently. The word mother stuck in his throat like a prickly lump. He hadn't uttered it since the day he burst into the ward, arriving several hours too late. He had only reached her cold hand and the emptiness in the doctor's eyes. "Do you understand what you're facing?" Smirnov continued. "AWOL, unauthorized absence from the unit. Article 337th. Up to 2 years in a disciplinary battalion. And, considering that our unit," he paused meaningfully, "has a special status, they could easily tack on up to 5 years of imprisonment. You disrupted the preparation of documents for the group's deployment. You screwed everyone over, your company commander, me." Viktor raised his eyes to him. There was neither fear nor remorse in them, only bottomless, burnt-out weariness. "I understand, Comrade Major." No, Morozov, you don't understand anything. Smirnov took a step closer. You think you're the smartest one? Thought you'd get away with it? You know what's most screwed up about your story? Not that you ran away, but what you were doing before that. Victor's heart skipped a beat. He understood what he was talking about.
The special section was here, the major stated matter-of-factly. Captain Orlov, he was asking about you, praised you highly, said you were a valuable asset, conscientious, helping to identify, so to speak, the unhealthy atmosphere in the collective. He asked me to help ensure you weren't punished too severely, said you were acting in the interests of the service. Victor shrank into himself. This was the end. Now, it was all official. You know what I told him? Smirnov leaned in, his face inches from Victor's. I told him that Private Morozov is a deserter and will be held accountable to the full extent of the law, and that his help is the death throes of a coward trying to buy himself a cushy job, and that if he ever interferes in the affairs of my battalion again with his rat games, I will personally write a report to his superiors in the district. He got the message quickly. They have a nose for danger. Victor couldn't utter a word. He expected to be betrayed, but not like this, not by the chief of staff, who himself had benefited from his servility. Now listen here, scribe. Smirnov straightened up. Your AWOL has been documented as an emergency hospitalization due to family circumstances, followed by leave. I signed the papers myself, backdated. The doctor in the medical unit is an old friend of mine. He confirmed everything. As far as everyone's concerned, you were in the hospital. No AWOL. Victor raised his head in stunned disbelief. He couldn't believe his ears. This couldn't be happening. But why? Because those you betrayed stood up for you, Morozov, the major snapped harshly. That night, when you bolted through the fence, the duty officer saw you. He reported it to the sergeant. You know who was the officer in charge of the company? Sergeant Popov, your musclehead. He could have raised the alarm in 5 minutes, and you would have been caught while you were still warm on the highway. But he didn't. He only reported it to me in the morning. He said you were complaining of chest pains, and he personally sent you to the medical unit. They stalled for time all night. The whole company knew, and the whole company kept silent. Timur Karimov, whom you ratted out for having an illegal phone, was on guard duty and didn't notice the hole in the fence, which he himself cut for you. They gave you a chance you didn't deserve in the slightest. Victor looked at his hands, the very hands that typed reports and memorandums. His fingers trembled slightly. He remembered the scornful looks of Musclehead, his condescending smirks. He remembered compiling a report on him for a fight, relishing every word. And that man had cut a hole in the fence for him. I don't understand, he whispered. And you won't, Smirnov cut him off, because you were always alone, and they aren't. They may despise you. They may want to beat you to a pulp, but they know what a mother is, and that there are things more important than your snitching merits. You'll return to the barracks to finish your service, but your place in the headquarters is taken. Your privileges are over. You'll live like everyone else. Polish boots, stand guard duty, dig from the fence until lunch. And if I hear so much as one complaint, so much as a hint that you're trying to weasel your way out again, I will personally tear up the documents that saved you and send your case to the prosecutor. Did you understand me, Private? Yes, sir, Comrade Major, Victor answered mechanically. Good. 2 months, Morozov. Just 2 months until your discharge. You'll endure it. Now get out. They're waiting for you. Returning to the barracks was worse than the interrogation with the special officer. When he entered, the murmur of voices instantly died down. Dozens of pairs of eyes stared at him, not with hatred, with something worse, with cold, detached curiosity, as if he were an insect under glass. His bunk by the window, the privileged one, was occupied. His bedside table was, too,
The duty officer silently pointed to the farthest corner, near the entrance to the drying room. The cot was empty, without a mattress or pillow. He silently walked there. No one said a word to him. He walked past Sergei Popov. The muscle man was sitting on a stool, polishing his belt buckle to a mirror shine. He didn't even lift his head, but Victor felt his gaze on his back. Heavy, like a concrete slab. Timur Karimov, who was sitting next to him, demonstratively turned away. The night was the longest. He lay on the bare boards, covered with the pea coat the sergeant major had given him. Every rustle, every sigh in the sleeping barracks echoed in his ears like an alarm. He waited. He waited for them to pick him up, drag him to the washroom, and give him a dark treatment. But nothing happened. He simply didn't exist. It was worse than any hazing. He was a ghost in his own company. In the morning, at the formation, the sergeant major read out the order. Private Morozov, 3 extra kitchen duty assignments. No one even snorted. It was business as usual. The first day on duty was hell. Mountains of potatoes, greasy cauldrons that had to be scrubbed with a metal brush until they shone, the stench of the garbage bin. His hands, accustomed to paper, instantly blistered. The cook, a demobilized contract soldier, whom everyone simply called Cook, looked at him with lazy contempt. "Move it, scribe," he hissed through his teeth. "This isn't headquarters. You have to work here. Learning the hard way?" Victor was silent. He rubbed, scraped, cleaned. He was no longer Victor Alexeyevich, as the young lieutenants had called him. He was Scribe. A nickname that used to sound like a mark of distinction now became a brand. The days blurred into one gray, endless streak. Kitchen duty, cleaning the grounds, cleaning the latrines. The dirtiest, most thankless work was now his. He no longer tried to curry favor with the superiors. He simply carried out orders, silently, methodically, with downcast eyes. The arrogance peeled off him like scales. He learned to be invisible. Sometimes he saw the company leave for the training ground, in new digital camouflage uniforms, with modern assault rifles, with tablets for the squad leaders. They were practicing storming buildings, preparing for Syria. Sergei Popov, the muscle man, now a sergeant, was commanding a squad. He moved confidently. His commands were clear and sharp. Timur Karimov, the drone operator, sat apart. His face was focused as he looked at the screen. Victor watched them from the cafeteria window, scraping burnt porridge from the bottom of a pot, and for the first time in his life felt not envy, but something else. Shame. A dull, all-consuming shame. They were soldiers, and he wasn't. He was just a function, a system error, tolerated until its expiration date. One evening, when he was scrubbing the floors in the corridor, Popov walked past. He was returning from his evening run, sweaty, angry. He stopped next to Victor. "You're not scrubbing properly, Morozov," he said quietly, but in a way that sent a chill down Victor's spine. "Streaks are left." Victor squeezed the rag tighter. I'll redo it, Sergeant." Popov stood for another second, looking at his hunched back. Then he snorted and walked on. It was the first time in a month that someone from them had addressed him directly. There was a month left until the discharge. The tension in the unit was growing. Popov's and Karimov's group was supposed to be sent out any day. In the barracks, they talked about the deployment more and more often. Victor listened to these conversations out of the corner of his ear, continuing his invisible life. He had lost weight, looked gaunt, dark circles formed under his eyes. He no longer looked at himself in the mirror. On the day the order for discharge came out, it was quiet in the company. The demobilized soldiers didn't make noise, didn't rejoice. They were seeing off those who were flying to Khmeimim.
Victor saw Popov saying goodbye to the young soldiers. He clapped them on the shoulder in a brotherly way, saying something. Timur Karimov stood nearby, smoking, looking into the distance. Their faces were serious, adult. Victor received his documents and military ID in the office, at the very table where he himself had once sat. The new clerk, a quick-witted junior soldier, looked at him warily. Victor signed the ledger and went out. On the parade ground, the Dimobis, with bags, were already standing, waiting for the car to the train station. He stood aside, separate from everyone. Suddenly, Sergei Popov approached him, in full combat gear, with an assault rifle on his chest. He held out his hand to Victor. Victor was taken aback, but he shook his hand. The Mussulman's palm was as hard as a stone. "Your mother, that's sacred," Popov said hoarsely, looking Victor straight in the eye. There was no forgiveness in his gaze, but there was no hatred either. There was something heavy, masculine, understanding. "You paid for it, Morozov. Just hang in there, back in civilian life." He turned and walked towards the Ural truck that was supposed to take their group to the airfield. Victor watched him go. He didn't say, "Thank you." The words seemed pathetic and out of place. The train crawled slowly through Russia. Bleak autumn landscapes drifted past the window. Victor sat by the window in an old sweater and jeans. Civilian life felt foreign, uncomfortable. He took out his military ID. A self-assured young man with a pampered face stared back at him from the photograph. He didn't recognize him. That guy was dead. He died there, in the guardhouse cell, on kitchen duty, under the scornful gazes of those he had betrayed and those who had saved him. He opened the door with his key. The apartment was quiet and cold. It smelled of dust and something else. The scent of absence. He went into his mother's room. Everything was in its place. Her favorite armchair, a stack of books on the nightstand, a framed photograph on the wall. A young, smiling mother holding little Vitya in her arms. He went to the window. Down below, in the courtyard, children were playing. Life went on. His unauthorized absence hadn't changed anything. He was too late. He didn't get to say goodbye. He simply ran away, violated everything he believed in, and got what he deserved. But standing there, in the deafening silence of the empty apartment, he suddenly understood that Major Smirnov was wrong. He understood. He understood why Kachuk hadn't raised the alarm, why Karimov had cut the wire for him. Because in a trench, in a barracks, in battle, it didn't matter. You weren't alone. And there were things stronger than regulations, stronger than fear, stronger than betrayal. He had come home, alone, changed forever. A soldier who had never been in combat, but who had fought his most important war, with himself. And in that war, he lost everything he had in order to gain something he never had, an understanding of the value of humanity. He sank to the floor, leaned his back against the cold wall, and for the first time in many months, he wept. Not from grief or self-pity, but from a belated, bitter realization. The army hadn't broken him. It had built him, anew. On the ruins of the old, arrogant clerk, Viktor Morozov,